Hi, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm going to give you a few minutes just to share this broadcast, please, and thank you. And I am waiting for my special guest to join today. Marin is going to be dropping in. Marin and I haven't had a chance to catch up on some big things we've been working on. Many of you know Marin if you listen to Canada 51 Spaces. That's how we met. Abroad.com is where you can check out Marin's work. I'm going to put that in the purple pill for you. Broadcom.net. That's how you can find Marin's work and support her work. She is originally from Germany, and she is an international correspondent. And I have so much respect for her, so much love for her, and she is on the pulse. So I'm excited to be welcoming her soon. So our topic today, we're going to talk about travel, US and Canada, US CIS, visas, travel, US, Canada, what's going on. I know many of you are confused with the system. You were confused even before a change of administration. Many Canadians frustrated, and many Americans don't really know what's going on with their immigration system because they're bombarded with what's going on with illegal immigration. And it's easy to say, well, we have legal immigration, so there's pathways. But when you start peeling the onion back, you start to see there is some problems. And I'm a prime example. As an international journalist, I can tell you there is issues with travel, with immigration, concerns. I'm just one of many. I would say there's many that are probably in the same boat, but I find not a lot of people are talking about it. So I hope Marin is going to jump on here right away because her perspective on it's so good. I'll give you mine, but honestly, she is a wealth of information and somebody I respect in the journalist community. So you want to have people that are not going to give you one-sided opinions. You want to hear from journalists and hear from researchers and hear from people that aren't afraid to take whatever the issue is and deliver the facts and dissect it. And I think that that's what we're missing today. We tend to get really caught up on political parties versus taking apart the situation, finding all sides of it, but fully addressing the problem. I'm at the point in my career where I don't want to break the news. I don't want to make the news. I want to fix the problem before it breaks and it's out of control. I mean, I think any good journalist with a heartbeat and a brain, that's what they would be focused on. I like myself, it's like quality control. And when you see an issue, if you can get all the facts, get all the evidence, take all the data, talk to people, listen to people, then you've got a well-rounded circle of understanding the complexities of it and be able to offer solutions. So we're going to tackle this like it's more than one episode, but we're going to get through it. So I'm just talking to Marin here. Give me 2 seconds. I'll find out if she's still able to join us. Okay, signal looks good for her. I'm really hoping she can get on because you're gonna love her like I do. She is just bang on point, and that's who I want to surround myself with is like-minded journalists like that can offer really good perspective. So I'm just gonna glaze over this. I'm not going to get into all of it, and please share this broadcast before we get too far in. That would be great if you would do that. But it's going to be really interesting. So let's see. Let's start with kind of like topic 1, timeline of US visa application status and its relation to terror attacks. Okay, so we're going to get into that today. We're also going to get into ESTA requirements for land travelers in 2023. Okay, so and then if we have time, we'll get into the third part. But this is going to be an episode if you think you understand immigration, we're going to give you another perspective of it, because I can tell you firsthand as someone who's trapped in the system. Okay, like doing it legally, there by design, it's a system, and I've personally identified and lived through what I would call a nightmare. The illegal immigration is for a reason. So we have to go, hi, Marin. Okay, Marin's just coming on. I see her. She's a listener. You guys, this is real time. I'm inviting her to speak. She just has to accept the microphone there, Marin. I sent it to you. Okay. Hello. Marin, can you hear me? It shows you have a mic. You just need to unmute it. And I'm just going to check. There you go. Okay, you are live. I'm going to just check our streams. Hi, Marin.
Hi, Val. How's it going?
Good. How are you today?
Pretty good.
Good. All right. We are streaming on YouTube. I have us there. And we are on Facebook. And of course, we're live on X this morning. And I was just getting into kind of the topic of today's episode. I don't know if we're going to get through everything today or this full stream, but it's an important one. We're addressing USCIS, visas, travel, US, Canada, and I was just sharing like your perspective on it. I have a notepad out and I'm taking notes because what you offer is so good. You are so solutions based when there's a problem. Like I'd hire you if I was the last man standing at USCIS. I would hire you, Marin. So take it away. Welcome to the show. Let my audience know a little bit about you and your background.
Thank you, Val, so much. And that was really very interesting. I'm probably very critical of latest developments in obtaining any kind of status with the United States corporation. And therefore, it made me laugh when you said I'd hire you if I were the last one standing at that authority. So basically, it's interesting to maybe understand that personally myself, I have been going through a transformation, and I am coming out at a very different picture just because I was fortunate and privileged enough to be able to look at America with an outsider's point of view, but from close proximity, which many Europeans are, don't have the privilege of being able to do. And I feel that really changed my positions, because if you are speaking with people one-on-one, you will be able to notice viewpoints that oftentimes are neglected in any kind of other channeling, and it is also my conviction as a media professional, out of experience, really, that any channel is biased. The judgment doesn't occur with the objectivity of one channel. The unfettered judgment and flow of information occurs when all channels have the same access to the market and everybody is policed on the same code. That is really what is more important.
Okay, well, let's get into that.
You assure the freedom of the press. Now, yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I think as a journalist, I'm a journalist, you are a journalist, and we are on, both of us, on international platforms. And I identified a problem myself going through the system, which is legal immigration. So I, I could have made a choice, right? It all starts with a choice. There is laws in place for a reason when it comes to each country. They have a border, they have, these are the agreements. And what you're touching on today, I think, is going to be an eye opener for people because there's conflicting. I guess the mainstream media would disagree when you are talking about the United States as a corporation. So there could be some confusion that may come in when you or I are referencing, visas or United States immigration. So I'm just going to preface it with that because I want to take this apart, regardless of who's in power. This is a national security issue at hand because, like, and we can get into this, but to me, there has to be checks and balances, or else you don't have a border. You have literally anything, and it's what's going to happen then. So, what's your thoughts on that?
I really think that I want to be perceived, and that's probably a good thing to mention first, as somebody in service of the American people and the North American people for that. Because when immigration is at a point, or bureaucracy in general, administration is morphing away from efficiency to a bureaucracy. That's not only me saying that. We had big changes happening lately. But it needs to be understood that it's not in representation and the interest of the American people and the representatives in America, in the United States, which is not only a corporation but also a republic. I want to address that. All of these things are kind of like just viewpoints and positions where you come out after you studied all these things a little bit. And if you have the chance to look into the great laws and the natural law and the law of the land. These are all kind of synonyms for the same thing. I didn't pronounce that right. But I don't want to say I know all these things. It's just that I like from where I am now after I full disclosure became adopted into a independent Métis nation. I understood with the teachings that many aspects of this framework are grossly misrepresented. And that's why it's so shocking to people and so offensive to lay out a few details. But I don't do that because I like to, give flack to one of the most powerful and influential nations on the planet, whose veterans have incredibly contributed to my freedom in West Germany, where I grew up. So I feel deeply patriotic voicing these concerns because what I see happening, that is now my takeaway, which prompted me to, pay professional attention, media treatment to these matters, is that the current proceedings are not in favor of the American people.
Mm-hmm.
The American people, as in small business, for example, have a hard time finding the right person. And that cannot be a question of their origin. If they're already land traveling in Turtle Island, I guess you could look differently at air travel, if you want to focus on foreign nationals. But
Well, let's back up a little bit, because I'm
just so everybody knows where I'm coming from, I find it's really not in the interest of the American people to be overburdened and stricken in decade-long applications that never amount to anything. That wastes away the best years of a people that needs to be together as really one family and family members, as there is a few mutually exclusive agreements between, for example, Canada, the Northern Corporation, and the United States, and also Germany and the United States, so that you cannot, for example, apply for asylum. That's a very interesting detail, and it's probably well-intentioned, but the effect of it is catastrophic because many people who are in abusive, victimized situations in either Canada or the United States cannot get away to the other side where they think the perpetrators can't go. So that is very concerning. So we got to look at what is the effect of it, not what is the intention of it. Let's look at what is the effect of it, and also that's what I thought we could do an initial show like today, that we look at what are the origins even of these visa applications and how has travel been regulated at all, because after all it's just
right
from one
right
place to the other. That's really what it is,
yeah.
There shouldn't be a big deal on it.
Let's start there. That's a great place to start. First and foremost, I want to honor our veterans. Like you, I am indebted to them. I'm indebted to them, to each one of them, to their families. I would not have the platform to broadcast today. So I am so incredibly thankful and grateful. And they understand better, I think, than anyone else, probably, what it's like to be a journalist and be caught in these spaces where we find ourselves, where it is our job, to dig into things, to ask questions, to understand. And before we start at the beginning, I just want to say where we're at now, with the success of cleaning up the border. The reason the border is becoming clean again is because there's a president who isn't afraid to look at the root problem of the issue. And I think he's well aware. And when we had Joe Biden, there were millions coming across. He wasn't willing to address some of the root issues. But we're going to go even deeper than that, because I was happy to have this discussion with Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Donald Trump. I don't care who's in power. I'm not interested in preaching to a choir. I'm interested in the national security of this country and this land that I love. And if it's a threat level coming on the northern border or the southern border or any border for that matter, you want to have a wise administration that doesn't shut you down, but works to say, let me see, show me the facts. So when you're living through it and going through it and trapped by it, it's very serious. I'm a censored journalist, and I've had threats against my life. It is not safe, nor do I have the ability to broadcast freely like I do here. And that is because of our vets. So to be on this platform today and have this space to share my story with you, even though it's running through my channel, is truly a freedom and a privilege. And that's why I'm hoping that we can unpack this mess. But where it sits, because I know media that's listening, they like short, quick, to the point. You need to know this, that it doesn't matter how bad the human right concerns are, or human right violations against a journalist or against a regular person. You are unable to seek asylum in the United States. It's not allowed. There's a special deal, I guess, somewhere that they will not file. I tried to get a lawyer to file that, and she's like, "You're not going to be successful. I'll tell you that right now. You are not going to be able to get that." There's kind of like this agreement between the two countries. And, I recently heard that, oh, well, you can just move to the United States. You can move there and buy property, and you will just get a residency on your driver's license. No, that is not true. Okay, I am an Albertan living in United States, doing everything by the rules, by the book, and I'm over $30,000 in, vetted, uh, like poked, prodded, the whole 9 yards, cleared for flight, but I was rejected. So, I wasn't able to change to another status. I'm stuck. I'm stuck in a system at $30,000. So I just want to preface it with, let's go back to the beginning now and talk about, wow, there is a problem with illegal immigration and legal immigration. And perhaps today you're going to learn another side of the story of how we arrived here today. So, Maren, take it away. Start us at the beginning from your perspective. Maren, you're on mute. There we go.
I'm trying to unmute it. It's not working my way here. You know what? The devil is really in the detail. So when you say you feel stuck, why don't you explain to us what that actually means for you? Because there is very strict frameworks for working as a journalist in the United States, which was not regulated at all for the longest time. Okay, I'm like really old, so I know the difference. I remember when I was able to work for foreign media in Germany from the inside of the United States with no application at all.
Okay.
I used to have my media credentials on me, and that was easy peasy, and it was lawful and it was legal. And now you are a foreign media journalist in the United States, which is an extra visa application. Okay, just so people know what that actually entails. Because usually people hear that and they're going to go, well, why she just sell to some US media? Well, that's exactly the point. You can't do that. According to that visa application, you can only sell with contract documented to the immigration authorities that you are working for other non-US media. Okay, you cannot just start working in the United States. That's why, it is so very difficult to survive as a journalist today. And a lot of people don't realize that these categories prescribe certain behaviors but not allow for certain others.
Yeah. That's interesting. Okay, so that is a valid point.
I know you want to go somewhere else, so let me try to take it there. Originally, I'm coming back to my full disclosure. It's really just like coming from West Germany to North America in 2000 and 2001. I really didn't know much about the native North Americans. I knew they were at a systemic disadvantage, looking at the modern administrations. And I did not know, for example, that there's a few free tribes, independent tribes. I have never contract, never ceded their territories. In fact, the whole of the Canadian capital is located on never ceded, never conquered, never contracted Algonquin territory. So some people started saying, that it was shut down for this manufactured crisis in 2020 is really an effect of following really native law, natural law, and emptying those buildings because the crown has to remove itself from those lands. Also, just to give an example, what also could be a possible interpretation of what is actually going on without making people lose face. Your representatives, so-called representatives, just another example of what you think is going on and what might really be going on. But it's just it comes to us disguised, and that's why it's so important to check other viewpoints. Now, I hope I'm getting the website addresses right, but I want to refer people to a few websites. I know you were able to dig up cross-referencing with ChatGPT, but I think it's interesting to study constitutional natural law, and there's a few websites that are going to lead the way. I know that my own nation has quite some information on inalienable rights, for example, which predate the United States Constitution. And on the Canadian side, it's interesting, apparently even Queen Anne has acknowledged that those rights are in place and valid, and that no European ruler, no matter what the negotiation, could be stepping away from these inalienable rights. For example, the pursuit of happiness and liberty, to be free from government overreach, to sustain your own lifestyle, to make a living on your own property, to use the land to make your own living, and to travel freely and unhindered. And there's a few other inalienable rights, but that is very well reflected in the great law and natural law and the law of the land. So that's like we're inherently free. We cannot be, first of all, Americans know no taxation without representation, but it's really older and more fundamental than that. Fundamentally, Americans, North Americans, or Turtle Islanders, really more politically correctly, do not represent. They do not have representation. They self-govern. That is the traditional way of organizing societies in North America. So that is why the maxim of let's downsize government is really a long tradition that is even older than American traditions or like US American traditions. And I think that is almost forgotten. I don't think anybody is learning that in school or in law class in university. I wouldn't know that it plays any role in the traditional conventional education in the established institutions of our Western societies. I sure did not know that coming out of a West German university. And so I want to just encourage everybody to, research that themselves. But in fact, the United States Constitution that never overruled these old laws. In fact, the amendments and the whole construct is in favor of respecting the old laws, respecting and manifesting the great law and the law of the land that is in congruence with the law of the land. And that's why every other law that Congress made or makes or shall make, it'll be void. It'll be nil and void because it is not in congruence with the United States Constitution, which represents these greater laws, the great law.
Okay.
Is that helping?
Yes. Yeah. So let's just unpack that a little bit. You are saying moving forward, if I hear you correctly, that you're expecting what? Like what are you expecting to see or expect to happen?
I expect that we're going to see another disguised development. I mean, it is also my recognition that, while many parts documentedly are of the United States administration are undermined by certain secret services and shadow governments. And I think, just looking at the sheer volume, it'd be naive. It'd be naive looking at the sheer volume of the budget of this resort. We just did a rough calculation, remember, 2 days ago when we were briefing about this production, that, you estimated that there might be about 500 million applications to one or the other form of work permit or immigration visa or travel visa in the United States. So from the newest development, I know since 2023, I think, any visa application, even if you have an asylum claim, you have to pay $184 into the machine. I don't know of any office where you could make a payment. One bank in one branch confirmed to me, yeah, we can make the payment for you if you have the cash here. You have an account with us, you have the cash, we'll do the payment for you to that account, no problem. But I don't know any other way to cash pay the visa applications of the United States. That means you have to use an online apparatus. Somebody programs that. Somebody contracts that. So that creates government.
Oh yeah,
business.
Yeah.
And so on and so on. So the whole thing has like a self-amplifying dynamic to want to get bigger. It wants to get bigger and bigger. Now, 500 million times $184. That's a lot of money. That is $1 billion, isn't it?
$1 billion, but I'm going to challenge you that it's actually more than that because we, as an example, are a family of 5 people. And I'm going to come back to the media visa because it's so important when, like, immigration, one of their top files has to be freedom of the press. So identifying who's in your country, what are they doing? Are they checks and balance? That's how I live. That's how I do business. And that's how I conduct myself as a journalist. I'm a high integrity journalist and I'm in good standing. And
I second that.
so I'm going to just give you an eagle eye view of what it looks like and where the errors are. So the iMedia visa, which is for journalists, so any journalist, okay, in fact, USCIS on their website, the reason I applied for a foreign media visa was because it was very detailed in saying you cannot be in our country and doing broadcasts without applying or registering for this visa. And because I'm a high integrity journalist and this was the law of the land, I wanted to do that. And now, where did this iMedia visa come from? That's another question. Well, that came into effect right after September 11. In fact, it was brought forward by Hillary Clinton. She's responsible for that visa, which came into effect approximately November. I'm going off the top of my mind here, but it was roughly November of 2011. Am I right on that?
Really great research. I'm so thrilled to hear that. And following that up. And you know what? We should put that in the nest. If we have such a thing, I have no clue how to get there. But
do you know, Marin? I can't even share that. I can't share that because that's off. That's in my head. I'm trying to find that actual bill, that law.
Then let's commit to double checking that.
Okay.
Because it's going to be interesting to come to somewhat of a timeline, you know. So let's just see what the actual thing was.
Okay.
That year or the year before. What else happened? That's also interesting to look, you know.
I'm sure it was right after 9/11. I would stake my reputation on it. But again, I'm going off the top of mind. I don't have ChatGPT in front of me or my computer.
Speaking of 9/11, let me insert this because I know for a fact what changed for foreign travelers into the United States, non-Canadians, because there is also a difference. So, because Germans used to have privileges with the United States, and the Canadians still have privileges with the United States. But for the German citizens, after 9/11, the visa waiver program, which was a very frequent and popular framework to the United States, melted down from 6 months to 3 months. Before that, as a foreign journalist, I could have been in the United States up to 6 months consecutively with no visa. Given the fact I was reporting for reputed channels like public radio in Germany. I mean, they have since turned on their own people, unfortunately, but at the time, you know, everything is gradual. It's just like, when are you jumping into this circle? You know, it's kind of like a spiral. We go through these phases. But at the time, that was very prominent, very well-reputed channels. I received a very good education there. For example, the ARD, which stands for the Allgemeine Rundfunkanstalt Deutschland, I believe, which is the General Broadcasting Institution Germany. And then the ZDF, for example, or you know, all the radio stations, the public radio stations, that is a provincial competency. It's interesting to insert that here maybe, because after the Second World War, the Western Allies made sure that Germany wasn't allowed to have national broadcasters. So the information distribution couldn't be in one monopolistic nationwide hand. Like, we had bad experiences with that, mind you, huh? So interestingly enough, you know, we have a few provinces, like 12 provinces, who all have their own radio licenses and operate their own independent radio program, where they share shows. But in fact, this is not a federal competence. We only have two federal broadcasters, both of which I also worked. Because I'm a biologist, it's maybe also interesting to understand. I work for a lot of science shows and energy. I did energy topics and stuff like that. But just to show you, this was after 9/11. I know that for a fact. I usually was able to land travel in, showing my media accreditation from I think that was a labor union that accredited me, and you can also do that with there's also an international, right now I have the accreditation of the International Federation of Journalists. And with that accreditation, they were satisfied that I was using my equipment for my own home channels. And so I was able to travel in, and that, I would think, because I was channeling a lot of American music that wasn't commercial music, that was very much in the interest of the American people, just to illustrate, because I brought to the German radio and the German audiences music that they would otherwise never heard. Not commercial people, but mostly people whom I met along my travels. That's how I programmed the music part of my shows, And I had that air once a month on German radio. And this is now much, much more difficult to do, So that's my change for 2001 in talking about 9/11. Sorry, didn't mean to hijack that.
No, that's important stuff in there. This is really important to get into this, just how much of the specific visas for journalists have changed and how difficult it is. So as of today, I just thank you in the background here, just for the extra set of eyes and hands, because I am trying in real time, just to source. And as I'm going through this, I'm shocked at how they're changing the wording, you can't just move the goalposts here. So we have to go back to 2001 and address why, after a horrific um, terrorist attack on the United States, why they were only accepting 100. It was 100 or 120 foreign media visa correspondence a year. That's according to immigration. And again, I have all the hard records of that because
Wow.
So this is very interesting. We're breaking, yeah, there's only 100 to 120 because the number actually changed. In fact, I have two copies. At one point it was 100, then it was 120. So you had to be the best of the best, the top at what you're doing, to be in that considered. That's how I took it. I was like, well, if I'm going to apply for this, I really need to have who I am, my history, why, what I'm going to be doing, etc. And so my research was very clear. If you are going to do any kind of broadcast, like talking, doing a show where you have a microphone on, you have to have an I visa. Now, I'm coming from Canada, and just because we call it Canada or Candyland or, elbows out or whatever, the reality is it's very socialist and very communist in nature. So understand that my background was spending 20 years in an environment that was heavily, heavily propagated, and everything was going through channels and checks. So I wanted to make sure I knew every crossed. And let me tell you, I did that. I didn't just pay $180. I actually had to apply for what was called a DS 160, which was just uh, welcome to USCIS. We're going to take $160. Okay, so I did that. Then I applied. Then after the DS 160, I then applied for my media visa, and I could get my cards out, my receipts to show you, but it's all paid online. So you pay that in advance before you go. You don't get to like show up at the embassy. You have to wait for a time, and you are approved for an appointment. You go there and you need to have your work contracts. You need to prepare a package, which I did. I gave them a full outline. I was very active in my community. I have awards. I'm recognized as one of the best in a very, very large media conglomerate. And I put my nice business suit on. I answered all of the questions, and we came here by the rules. And we came here, but guess what? You can't work for any US company. You can only have contracts that are based out of your own country, or other countries, I guess, for that matter, as long as they're approved, right? Like, so if you're going to stay within the confines of this, you are either going into the environment I did, which is work for nothing in the United States because you don't have work authorization here. Um, and your family cannot work. They can be here, but they can't work on it. So there were many times during our process where our family was um we couldn't work here, so we had to just live off of savings, off of, like, it was unbelievable to look back and go, how we even managed to survive this far, this long. But I can tell you the cost on family. We now have a 19-year-old who can't go to school here. He can't work here. He's missing out on foundational times in a young man's life. But to keep our family together, he's here and volunteering. And it's ripping off the next generation as someone who is in their system. And in their system, I feel very trapped. I don't feel safe. um, I've shared videos online where even to get my driver's license, like my ability to drive and physically travel, is limited based on that visa. And I didn't know that the DMV and the foreign media visa, like they work together to limit you and restrict your travel. And so for those of you interested in following this,
could you just refresh everybody's memory by explaining what DMV stands for?
The Department of Motor Vehicles. So I was told I could only have my driver's license for a day. And then I said, well, like what? And I needed to make sure that I had checked in and let the department know what stories I was working on. And as a high integrity journalist, who
That's
is
like China. That's what China does.
It scared me. It really scared me because I'm working on international level stories.
Intimidating. It's super intimidating. Excuse me. I tried to explain to these people at the border. I got refusals en masse. Even so, I'm holding an I visa myself right now, but didn't have the contracts. Okay, so it was so difficult. But I tried to explain to them, sometimes you see your story after you arrive. You don't have a story until you go to the place. After you go to the place, have your boots on the ground, do your own in-person research at the scene of the event. That's when you get ready to sell that story. That's when you are approaching a moment where you can say, okay, this is how I'm going to case this. This is where I'm going to start. And this is my takeaway from my experience, the situation as I was able to experience it. It's very difficult to say, okay, I'm going to be going to, something that hasn't even happened. It really only corresponds with the approach visible in the B2 H1 visa, I think it's called, that allows for leisure travel and the attendance of conferences with no activity of sales or performance, but a performance only to attract business. Mm-hmm. In the acquisition of business, it is allowed to perform. This is why it's okay for musicians to attend big music conferences, but God forbid they would give one or the other concert on the way there or from the way back home from the concert, from the conference. It is so unnatural what these categories require, and I don't know if it's kind of like eradicated in our memory. But when I grew up, you see, a later partner of my mother was a law student, and then later he became a lawyer. And in that context, I was always made aware that laws that are difficult to enforce are bad laws. The good law is easy to enforce, and it bears many advantages to respect it for everybody. A good law bears the same advantages for everybody to respect it. And a bad law is, you can recognize it, that is very difficult to enforce. That is costly to enforce. For all of these drug regulations are extremely costly to enforce. And the damage really doesn't warrant that,
Well, I just want to add a little bit more. Thanks everyone for sharing this broadcast, retweeting it. It definitely, Susan nails it here. She says, if you were an illegal alien, you would have an SS card and a driver's license. And she is correct in saying that, because I took the pamphlet from the DMV. But I went home and, I'm very connected still in media circles, obviously. um, when you spend over 20 years in mainstream media, and then you're practicing in 100 different countries, people want to know what's going on, and you become, you're giving, my job is to tell the truth. Like, my job is, it said at the time when I uh, received my visa, it said, to tell the truth from the United States on what you're covering and what you're doing. And like, I took that oath as an honor, like a privilege, to be here. And so for me, like, it's not about who's in power. It's about what's happening, the truth of it. And so, citizens, Americans, would not have a clue what's going on inside their immigration office, other than, there's an illegal way and a legal way to come into this country. And so many will say, look at the border, look, border, and what's coming in. And what I'm saying is, you are right. I refuse to come into your country that way, but you need to know how corrupt it is on the inside, to the point that I believe when you start pulling those layers back and you start looking at the files, mine is one that anybody working needs to dive into, because you will see it's incredible that here's someone who's done it by the book, has went through every obstacle, blood, sweat, tears, does broadcasts here in the United States for free, and my right to free movement. Like, can you imagine going to the Department of Motor Vehicles and being told, oh, well, hang on, we have to call and check we have a special phone line we call for foreign media visa, and then being asked, what stories are you working on? Again, the foreign media that I'm in contact with, that I'm telling this to, they're saying, this is happening. What is going on? And so this is so serious, because what people don't know, and what I've had a hard time, and I've tried to report, is when you are investigating corruption, when you are investigating human trafficking, which I was at the time, and being told at the DMV, you tell me over the phone right now what you're working on, and I like what you're gonna tell them over the phone line. Like, I don't know, am I gonna get, I don't even have a car to drive away, like, am I gonna get shot outside? Is this a setup? And if you backtrack the steps of the foreign media visa, you are forced into that structure and that system, which is completely insane. It's regulated and governed by the Broadcast Board of Governors, and you can only have a chance at immigrating or working, get work authorization, if you are approved with a letter from the BBG, the Broadcast Board of Governors. Uh, hold on.
When did you find that out? What's the source of that?
USCIS. I have a rejection letter. Should I post my rejection letter for everyone to read? It says it right there. The supervisor signed it himself. And I'm like, wow. So I did. I went through the process. I registered. I stayed in their intake for over 2 years. Over 2 years. Now, this is the office that operates on a budget that would make the military blush. Like, people, the citizens of the United States have no idea how much money is going out there and what they're doing exactly. So, there's some big time errors, but it's important for people to understand, if, as a journalist, I have here in the United States freedom of thought, freedom of press, and right there, when I stood in that DMV and was told, you need to call and report what you're working on, let them know what you're working on, I was like, where am I? What is happening? And so that's only one file within the United States of Immigration Services.
What is your understanding about the budget? What do you think is the budget of that whole operation?
It was, well, I mean, when I was looking at it side by side with the military, I'm like, are they another military arm budget wise, like dollars and cents, what they were running off of? And then to know that I tried, like, I phoned their department, I messaged, I applied, and I even included that in my package, which I have. I did videos and I took pictures, because everybody wants a scrapbook from the time they start this process of becoming an American. And I was denied, I was rejected. But that was after I paid close to $26,000, getting all of my blood work. My little children had to do STD checks, of all things. I couldn't believe it. But
you got to be kidding. I mean, what a ka-ching. You got to be kidding.
Well, you have to, yeah. So you have to go to a special doctor, which I was like, look, if these are the rules, I'm willing. But I'm just saying that for there to be no outcome and just be left in this system, and to meet all of the requirements and to work like I'm working, the target on my back is severe. And who am I to go to? Where am I to go? So in the case of, I'm told you can't have a driver's license because of, here's where we're at. We need to know what you're working on. I was working, let me be clear, on international child trafficking, and my life was being threatened at the time. And I'm going to go walk outside in August in Arizona heat and die walking back to my house? Or who knows who's going to come pick me up, and what are they going to do? And who cares? There is no course of action. This system is broken. The media, visas in this country need to be looked at the highest levels. And I'm being delicate But again, my file needs to be one that's looked at, because as it sits right now, I have tried to report the bounty that's presently on me for my work on human trafficking, to expose human trafficking. And all I can tell you is that I really believe that if there was a communication gap fixed here, that Marco Rubio has no idea, what's going on there. But they need to bring in, if they only have 100 foreign media correspondents in this country. Well, this isn't hard. I'm sure there's an office big enough to bring us all in, and you look at what we've done. You take my work and say, you know, have they done a good job? And I believe that I have. I stand with our military. I am on my heart every day is to address the fact that we have 26 vets dying right here in the United States a day. Do you know how fast your army is shrinking? They went over and they served to keep you safe, and here they're dying on home turf. Those are the kind of stories that I will expose and talk about. And if I get killed doing it, then there needs to be an audience like today that knows about it and knows where the errors are. And I filed my story with the Arizona legislature. It is on record. So there can't be any excuses. There's calls, there's rejection letters. It's an embarrassment. This is the United States of America. And I don't care if I'm standing next to a left leaning journalist, I'll hold my own. I don't care if I'm standing next to a right wing journalist, I'll hold my own. I stand on my own 2 feet. And that's what a good independent journalist does. So whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden, I was prepared to go to Joe Biden's face and address this. I was prepared to go to Donald Trump's face and face this and say, please help. My life is in danger. So I really hope that the administration, I have hope that someone listening today looks at this, because we're just one family of the how many foreign media correspondents are in this country right now. It's a privilege and an honor to be here, but I am not interested in reporting on fake news and propagated stories. I'm going to tell it like it is, good or bad. I am not sold out. In fact, I'm sitting here volunteering my time day in, day out, and I will do it as long as I have a microphone, because I owe it to those vets. And if I can help bring awareness to what's going on in this country with 26 dying a day, not on my watch. And I'm just one journalist, but you know what? More will rise as they know it, because there is something seriously sick and wrong with the immigration program. To
Honestly, let me insert something, because kudos to you and thank you so much for your service, Val. But it has to be said, it has to be understood that bureaucracy and policing is not the friend of free thought and initiative. The more bureaucracy you create, the more complicated you make these applications, the more costly you make this. You don't get better people. You get people who can do the paperwork. That's not necessarily the better people. That's not necessarily the better journalist. The best journalist is there on site and talks to the locals. But oftentimes, that's an interest that is diametrically opposed to the people conceiving and organizing these applications. They have the applications in the undermined interest that I don't think the American people or large parts of the American public are aware how far the system is rigged in favor of this shadow interest. Whereas the effect on ordinary folk is that they can't see each other anymore, and families really belong together. Like, how many grandparents in Canada can't see their grandkids in the United States because they just can't afford the trip without working in their job. They could work on the way in their jobs, could do like odd jobs and work their way back and forth and stay with the kids for a year or two until they're bigger to help the parents. But that can't happen anymore. So the effect of that is, as I said, I like to look at the effect of that. You're more vulnerable to state-sponsored commercial solutions, corporate solutions, because you can't source this from the family unit anymore. Now that is what is 100% corporate interest. As soon as you can't source it out of the family unit anymore, I'm going to sell it to you for a profit. So you see these two things, they don't unite. You either have corporate interest or you have something that is in favor of the people. And, what you outlined in your experience to obtain legal status, because I believe your status is already lawful, as your inalienable rights cannot be impeded with. Honestly, the best part, the cherry on top of the cake, we haven't even talked about that, because in fact, you can even genealogically substantiate indigenous bloodlines. Many people can't do that anymore. They don't. They were born in Canada, but in their minds, they are not indigenous. They're white Canadians. Even so, that is also something that is today, after it's like 16 generations later, very, very difficult to substantiate. But in your case, you should have no problems traveling anywhere and sustaining your lifestyle anywhere in Turtle Island because you are actually native. So if you had this, you told me in the briefing, I don't know if I'm taking something away that you wanted to treat um, in a later broadcast, but I understand that that applies to many other Canadians and Americans. They cannot document, they need to be accepted and documented by the corporation they wanted to get away from, yet they have to search their consent. That's a very absurd situation, a very colonial situation, my point of view.
It's also very racist.
To assure that, yes, you are actually native and use your card, and now you can go travel and work wherever you want in the United States. Now, that some people abuse of that, that's another general remark that I wanted to insert here, if you allow me just one more point. It's also something that you were able to detail to me, that some people, because they have Indian stamped into their nationality, they go to the Department of Indian Affairs in Canada and get an indigenous sovereignty card. Now that's blatant abuse, okay? That's blatant abuse of the system, Susan. I don't know if you're still listening. But that's very, very, very popular, and that's how this fentanyl smuggling works. It's people who are legal towards the people at the border, the customs officers, and unfortunately, also many of the customs officers are implicated in the smuggling. They have their little clique, they have their little gang and their little route, and they bring all kinds of stuff that they're not supposed to be bringing. But that's the power of being an authority. That always begets abuse. The bigger you make the authority, the more bureaucracy you have, the harder the process, the more bureaucratic the process, the more abuse you're going to get. Trust me, I'm German. I mean, we invented the bureaucracy, people. It's not that I'm not talking of experience and you being taught in your education in Germany too. I went to a grammar school. I enjoyed 13 years of schooling. That's not exactly nothing. And I had very good teachers. And then after that, I went to university, not without doing stints in garages to see how the real world works. How the wrenching goes and how the cars are built and all, and everything that I needed to know. I tried to look into it, so I'd have a better overview, not only a niche view. I think that's something that you could criticize our education for today. We get niche views, but we don't get the overview. That's your own responsibility today, I guess. But just to say, generally, you didn't need to worry about all these things, and that was making it easier to be together with your family, and you were regarded as innocent, and only very few people, they were like, by the power of those customs authorities, by the power of the individual customs officer, screened face to face. And that is a much more complex way to look at a certain suspect. How are you going to judge people online? You can make yourself look very good online, and still you can be a total crook. And obviously, many people managed to do that. I came in with the Biden administration. But we are taking away authority and discernment from the one-on-one situation, which is really the most important situation to screen somebody. I'm going to let you in or I'm not going to let you in, And then now that many people abuse of this in one way or the other, like many Indian immigrants into Canada from India benefit from the very fast processing in Canada and then get a native status card, and boom, they have their truck driver's license, and guess what? They're holding down states. If that's now legal, I don't know. At the time, it was part of
well, part of yeah.
Canadian truckers couldn't haul back stuff into the United States. Only United States truck drivers could do that. It's kind of like a repetition of what happened with the COVID mandates, at the United States borders. It's always abuse for something to inflict a condition on one group of people, not on the others. And that divides. That's how you divide people. That's how you create political scaling and positioning. This is very transparent throughout the decades. And it's not the first time that it happened in 2020 when these mandates happened. But it's worrisome to me that now everybody pays the price and has to go through these much more restrictive applications and live in the United States with these much more restrictive conditions just because some people abuse of the system. There's many more questions to that. I take it we're going to get to that. I heard you say, for example, legal immigration has brought this problem on. Now everybody's paying the price, and that's another very un-American. It's just what I wanted to point out. I find this very un-American. Traditionally, you are innocent until proven guilty. So how can you be rejected when you're just land traveling in and out of your own circle? You're trying to get to your reserve. You're trying to get to your market, whatever. You're trying to go shopping at Alexandria Bay, People live in Buffalo Prescott. They're just like, I don't even go there anymore. It's 10 kilometers away as the crow flies. And it's like a different planet. People can't get to each other anymore. It had a very bad effect on everybody who's living close to that. Like Donald Trump always says, the POTUS, the president number 47 of the United States, and the president number 45 of the United States, Donald Trump, it is a very artificial line. And it would be so beautiful if it was no longer there, because then all of these problems would disappear for Canadians, and they all just become legitimate residents of Turtle Island, which they already are, really, because they're locals, In my eye, I'm a legitimate resident of Turtle Island. I am legitimate by the Corporation of Canada, and I'm also legitimate in my independent tribe. They even make me an envoy. So I am even in the authority of representing their interests towards colonial authorities, corporate authorities, police, and diplomats.
Well, I'm going to jump in here on this one because where we're at today is we're now talking about crime. We're talking about national security on the northern border, and we're talking about evidence that is in real time. So this is a real time crime scene as it sits, because the U.S. is saying the border is not secure, and we're identifying, just with the Indian, if we want to go there with the Jay Treaty and what is the Jay Treaty, we have, first off, Indians coming in from India, okay? And in Canada, we have Indians they don't go by Indian. If you ask local Indians in Canada, they beg, they say, please call me Indian, because the government doesn't want you. The government is telling you it's racist to call us Indian. So we lose our heritage. We lose our names, our identity. They want us to call them sometimes First Canadians, or they change the verbiage of what's socially acceptable in Canada to call an Indian. But it is Indian. Now, where the confusion comes in is you can go right now and go to the Indian Embassy of Canada, and you get two choices as soon as you land on their portal. Are you a student or are you an Indian? Now, this is on Canadian soil. So, what are you? Are you an Indian student or are you an Indian? Okay. So, right there, you as an Indian from India are grouped in Canada as identifying as an Indian. Well, guess what? That means you have access to the following. So you can see where the confusion is. Now, with that, there's also bypassing of normal lineups for getting paperwork. You have special privilege through the Indian embassy. Like, I can't go to the Indian embassy even though I am under the J Treaty and for all intensive purposes classed here in the United States as Indian. In Canada, I can't do that. So there's all these little hot spots of concern that need to be inspected and looked at. And
so that's a really interesting situation. What does that do? It brings in a group of people who have no culture with the people who are already there. Very few people are brought up in the Indian culture, like from India, and the Canadian system allows for this systemic abuse. they close both eyes to this obvious fraud, and for people like you and I, who in whom the United States corporation and republic would have a vested interest to keep in a condition that it helps our productions and that it facilitates the ease of our research and work, we are being sabotaged and blockaded and roadblocked at our every turn. That makes for very, very limited press freedom. Basically, that is the removal of press freedom de facto. Okay, you cannot control when you want to press freedom. You got to remove the control if you are serious about press freedom. So we are being curtailed. We can work in the United States for various reasons, which would also be interesting to look at. We receive no salary from the people we work for. Okay. And so it's like extremely difficult because the media market has changed so drastically, that we're basically left to our own devices and absolutely scorned either way, and then vilified because other people, like Indians from India, take advantage of this. I don't know, like, I can only call this post-colonial and colonial scheming. They know what the effect is going to be. So they know that we're going to use these people. They're going to be good. They have no other prospect here in Canada. They're going to be basically used as a tool to destabilize the situation. And then everybody else is like, oh, we need more cops. We need more tasers. We need more fortifications. Give the money to the police. Let's make the surveillance bigger. No, we need to look at your data, blah, blah, blah. It's like the more this happens, the more this abuse happens, the less respect, the less understanding we seem to be able to see what the real benefit of the United States Constitution is. It seems to be more and more acceptable to compromise and pull out and pull back on certain amendments and justify the limitations by modern regulations with the fear factor basically, but also rightfully so. I would think one has to be outraged about the systematic and systemic abuse. I mean, especially by, and again, when you look closely at the Canadian administration, you come out at the recognition that it is really a cartel. It is like the mafia. We will protect you, pay us taxes, or else. That's really what it is. It is like a syndicate, a nationalist syndicate. It's not even a country. Its constitution was never ratified in any place in Canada. So technically, it's a colony. And that is being exploited because there is no such rights that
Well,
we can rely on with regard to our own constitution. And the ones that we could quote, we are uncomfortable quoting, and we're also very ignorant about them because we are othering that. It's not us, it's the natives. We're not native. We were born here, but are we native? That's an interesting question to ponder. I would think, yes, you were born here, you are native to the place. That's you, nativity. That's your birth. That's
that's
what
right.
the word means,
That's what
right?
it means. What's
So
really,
just to say,
sorry.
there's a multi-level development here. We gotta not just cry for more enforcement because that's not the solution. We gotta cry for. We really gotta. Honestly, I would advocate for. I've stopped advocating for Canada to be lawful because that's not the purpose of this whole framework. The framework here aims to exploit the population and the resources, make the people pawns in the way of the resource exploitation. That's really what Canada is. And in that way, I would really like for the Canadian people, everybody living in Canada right now, what is known as Canada, to have the same rights as United States citizens. They must have a way to argue their inalienable rights. And they also need to be educated about that big time. Another really big mistake thinking that everybody's on the same page. We are totally not. We are thinking of ourselves in a way that the United States people are not thinking of ourselves. And the other way around. We have at least 4 different perceptions here, probably many more. And we need to understand when we talk about rights, this is what we mean. We would all enjoy these rights. We would all have not income tax. We would possibly pay sales taxes, but we would not pay income tax. We would not owe income tax. We would not be taxed on our property. Like, there is many ways to slice this pie. But it has to be said that we need to educate people. We have a war of perception. It's really an info war. It's a dramatic term. And I don't like the way Alex Jones always presents his stuff, and he's probably also on the mind. But in fact, it is a very dramatic perception war. And we got to shine the light on the details and look at what is the effect of that. It separates people. It allows everything for the corporate world. And it closes both eyes to the obvious fraudulent trafficking corruption that is going on with the fentanyl problem. 100%.
Yeah, I agree with that. When you reference it's like in info war, I have went, door to door. I'm very active in my community here in the United States. And when the people start to hear what is happening, like in our personal situation, we have an entire community here, like I could have on standby to share. They could tell you what it's been like for us personally as a family unable to work, like just being able to keep it together. Do you know that we asked for emergency intervention? We had no work, right? Like they know that, and we said, please, would you look at our file and like and allow us to work, one of us to work, so we can, and they refused. So we've applied multiple times asking for emergency consideration to work for even just a short window, and we were turned away. So when I say the importance of this, it's because I believe the people of the United States, the citizens, need to say and define and tell their leadership what they expect from the press, what is healthy, what that they need to define it and fight for it, because they don't know what's going on inside of USCIS. Why would anybody care unless they're going through it or know somebody that's going through it? And that's why I think we start with the freedom of the press and we put the 120 that are up there. Or if they've now changed that number, who are those mouthpieces and what are they saying? Because trust me, my files and what I've investigated is all at a level of national security threats to the United States. And I'm addressing the shrinking army here in the United States. What is happening to those vets dying every single day? There is 16.9 million vets who sacrificed, and they're the only reason I am on the airwave today, and the only reason that bounty that's presently on my head as a foreign media correspondent who's right here on United States soil, a bounty is on my head, and that's okay. We're going to take a driver's license away. Incredible. It's incredible. And I'm just one, I'm just one story, but I won't stop. I will continue to go to senators. I will continue to try and alert and tell people, and hopefully someone is listening where they can address the legal immigration system, put it under the microscope and start dissecting it and start seeing. I submitted this. Okay, this is in the Arizona legislature, my story. And the most important part of it being that the legal immigration system and what they're doing right now should be treated and put under the microscope of law enforcement to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. It's all public information that you can look at, but when you look at the question today is, and I want to hear the Trump administration address, how many rejected Canadians have applied for citizenship in the United States? I think that number would be shocking. I am one story, but I was 20,000 pages deep into rejections of good citizens who, like me, tried to become legal citizens. They gave the best of what they do, whether they were creators, engineers, all kinds of things. You should see. And I've started to profile this and look at this for what it is. And I'm not approaching it as a right or left. I'm approaching this as a common sense person going, what is going on in that office where you're bringing in billions of dollars? And I have pages and pages where I've spotted a pattern of rejection. Canadian after Canadian after Canadian after Canadian. And I'm just one story of, but I'm not stopping until I get through every page.
That. Let me insert something here, Val, if you allow me. When I said I have been receiving some refusals, that's like really the way my interest sparked. I mean, I had previously also noticed that regulations had changed, and I've always felt very senselessly. But that I wanted to make a broadcast and take this whole system under the microscope really was rooted in the fact that I was rejected in Cornwall on Akwesasne Island after I already got a refusal 10 days earlier on. That must have been one checkpoint over to the west, which is in Gananoque, Ogdensburg, I think it's called. It's also on an island, and the other side is Messina, I believe, in New York State. In any case, all this place is Mohawk territory, and also Algonquin. It is now settled with mostly Mohawk, but many people have been traveling around and have, throughout the last 4 generations mixed and mingled. So there's lots of Cree and Algonquin and even Mi'kmaq from the east. So they basically go to your barrier after barrier after barrier. They have to pay a mod to get across the bridge and then back home when they return from their job site on the island. And I did some researches there. I researched with the locals, which was very interesting. It's maybe a good time to plug both of our YouTube channels on this. If you have any documentation in your channel and mine, I do. For once, I was talking to the traveling Mohawk College, I believe, on Akwesasne Island, and I made a really interesting video on this whole exchange that is in my YouTube channel at abroadcom, just like my website at abroadcom.net. And when I then traveled back into Cornwall, it was September, and I decided to stick around a little bit. I met many, many, many people on the island, in Cornwall, in Prescott, all along the St. Lawrence River in the province of Ontario and eastern Quebec, who told me, well, I can't go because I have a file, I smoked a joint or I had some weed on me, or it's an old charge from whatever, like 20 years ago or 30 years ago even, and many people hence do not go. Even so, those charges are questionable in their relevance to their modern day travel. You could definitely argue that there is no relevance to what they today going to be doing, going shopping in Alexandria Bay. That's that's my other question. When I listen to people telling me, there is 20,000 active threats known in the FBI about people that are currently in the United States, and to some people, according to some people, don't belong in the United States and should have never come into the United States. I wonder, what does that even mean? Like, I'd really like to understand what is considered a threat. You could hear any anti sovereignty lawyer argue, well, there is millions of people in Canada who have an ancient criminal charge because they pass a joint around. Basically, they're farmers, and they're enjoying bodily sovereignty and integrity, and decide they want to consume that one drug and not the other. That's what an adult person in North America always has been doing. It is a very modern occurrence to even want to regulate that. Never mind, taking away bodily integrity from North Americans, adult North Americans. That is very unnatural if you understand where I'm coming from. It's just not anything that you would traditionally consider doing in North America, and appears very fascist. That's all I have.
Wow. Wow. Uh, there is so much wrong today with what is happening when it comes to border check, when it comes to security, and what is the fine line? What is the right line? How do you keep a nation safe? How do it's a fine line of how to do it right. And so the importance of these discussions like this, like what we're having, to be able to sit at a table and discuss the full picture and really get to the rot of it. I just want to read a comment here from Susan. She says, illegal immigration is a threat to the USA sovereignty. So these are discussions from the citizen level up to those in command, up to the national security level. I mean, we're addressing real time crime, and we're submitting evidence on record right now that warrants an investigation and a response. And I know that I'm not going to stop. But I don't live in fear either. I'm not going to be pushed over and pushed around uh, by a system because I think part of my best training as a journalist was surviving and living through Canada. Um, I know corruption. I know corruption at a really special level, and the U.S. needs to be on guard, and they need to address. Okay, how do we fix this? That should be the number one question, and I'm hoping that Donald Trump soon is going to address the threat level to Canadian journalists.
ChatGPT at this point. Let's weigh that. Let's ask ChatGPT. I don't trust any of these artificial intelligences, but say I'm interested in seeing what the actual crime rate is and who commits these crimes and what their nationality is. And then we can see if we really need to be fearful of all this illegal immigration, because I'd highly doubt that. There is maybe like less than 1% who present as violent criminals. And then there's a question, they have a record, how do you let them in? That means there's corruption.
You're cutting in and out. You're cutting. I can't hear you, Maren. So your phone is.
I had problems earlier. Is it better now?
I can't even hear it. Yeah, it's like that's the sound, folks at home listening. Susan would.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to
I'm going to
use my other phone. I'm going to just drop out and come back in, okay?
Okay, and I'm going to bring you in, Susan. Welcome. Susan, the floor is yours. Just unmute yourself. Thanks for listening today. Go ahead.
I'm not quite sure I understand that she says that illegal immigration doesn't seem to be anything wrong with it, since less than 1% probably are committing the crimes. They already committed a crime against American immigration law. You snuck into our country. Actually, Mr. Biden let you into our country. 30 million in 4 years. No. If you came into my country illegally, you're out of here. You're gone. You're going back to your country. You have a chance to go on the little app and tell them that you want to go back home. And then that lets you reapply to do it legally if you'd like to come and be an American. But you have to understand something. You come to the United States and you want to be an American and you have a permanent green card, you cannot violate the terms of the green card or student visa or visa, because it's a privilege to have a green card or a visa in the United States. If you violate it, you can have your visa or your green card revoked and be deported. That's the law. That's at the discretion of the Secretary of State and the President of the United States. But if you want to be an American so bad, then you have to pick a country. You can't be both. You can't be from Germany and the United States. You can't be from Canada and the United States. You can't be from Venezuela and another state, another country.
Why are you saying that? That's
like
problem.
Like Teddy.
Next to the point.
Like Teddy Roosevelt said. Like Teddy Roosevelt said. Like Teddy Roosevelt said. He said, if you come to America, look, it's a fact. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just telling you. I'm just telling you the way Americans feel. That's the way we feel. That's the law.
No, you are telling us how you feel. I know tons of Americans who would never talk like that because they agree with President Kennedy, who was killed, for saying all ever Americans need to fear is fear itself. And people who
actually, it wasn't Kennedy who said that. It was FDR. But move on.
Okay, well, we can put that in the nest once we research that.
Again, it was FDR after Pearl Harbor.
I find it patriotic. I've been thinking about what you've been saying in the space with Jonathan and Dave Bjorkman on Sunday, and I really thought it was absolutely curious. Have you had a bad experience with an immigrant? Have you been a victim of a crime? Do you have professional experience with?
And let me tell you something. Those scumbags up in Massachusetts that raped and kidnapped 5-year-olds, five-year-olds. Well, let me tell you something. One of those 5-year-olds was my best friend's granddaughter. So they need to leave. They need to get out.
How do you
They
know
need,
it was
all of them need to
How
leave.
do you know it was them? How is that? Have they been pronounced guilty by a U.S. Judge?
They're gone. They don't get it, Judge. Don't you get it?
No, I really don't.
They're here illegally. Once
Says
you
who?
break our immigration laws, they're gone.
See, illegally being in the United States is a very questionable term that does not represent the law of the land that is still in place in this country. You're going to find
Which country?
who are gonna
Which country are you talking about?
United States is trespassing on Indian land. That is what the situation is. The United States is to the natives in Turtle Island an oppression, just like Israel is in Gaza. That's what they say. And you keep arguing this fear factor. That is, to me, that is ridiculous. We don't know what the numbers are. We don't understand at this point how many criminals are from a foreign country and how many criminals are actually born on American soil. That should be the number one factor for our assessment. And you just keep reiterating this stuff.
You're not an American, right?
So,
you're not an American. Actually, you're not. You're not an American.
Yes, I am. I live in America, so I'm an American.
So you're a dual citizenship.
So what?
You have dual citizenship. Look up what Teddy Roosevelt said on immigration.
That is your assumption.
Look at it. You didn't even know who said we have nothing to fear but fear itself. What kind of American doesn't know that?
Susan, you don't even know that. You just assuming things. Why don't you ask me some questions?
Well, obviously you didn't know who said we have nothing to fear but fear itself. You think JFK said it. He said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That's what he said. So
listen, I want to tell you I'm really sorry for your loss. And anybody who is a victim of a crime, I'm sorry.
No, you're not, because you think it's perfectly okay for 50 million illegal aliens to be in my country.
You know, you really sound like somebody's in your way to interrupt these conversations. I find this highly suspicious. How you just keep talking in circles. You don't bring any.
I'm not talking in circles. I think I'm being quite clear.
And you have not much understanding of what actually the lawful background of this situation is. I think you're an instigator. You behave like an instigator, Susan. That is really.
I'm not an instigator. I was responding to your comment on illegal aliens in the United States of America.
Let me ask you this: are you working with law enforcement? Are you paid by law enforcement? Are you a police officer?
No. But I have several cousins that are police officers up in Massachusetts.
You are very hateful. That's very.
No, I'm not. I'm ticked off at Joe Biden for opening our borders and letting 30 million illegal aliens, some of them murderers, drug traffickers, fentanyl cartels, rapists.
And by the way, that is really not substantiated. You just keep reiterating. You are parroting somebody that you perceive as a leader. Okay?
You are kidding, aren't you?
Why don't you do your own research? That is being American. To question authority.
I have friends that live on the border. I have friends. Do you have friends that live on the goddamn Texas border? No, yes, you don't.
Yes, I do. Many. I lived in Dallas myself sometime.
Do me a favor. If you have dual citizenship with Canada or wherever, go back to Canada or go back to Germany. One or the other.
So as you can see, it's very heated. It's very
quite noticeably. She's an instigator.
Well,
No, I'm not.
I think that okay, I'm going to jump in for a second.
Although, it's really concerning that some people are so badly informed. They lack any kind of understanding that they are moving to insulting international journalists in a live broadcast. That is really embarrassing. You should really do some research what channels we are working for. And we've been on broadcast with millions of people. It's
good. Now millions of people know what our border was like until President Trump became president.
Okay, no interruptions here, please. That is really disrespectful. We've been on broadcasts that you can compare to people like Tucker Carlson. It's just that we are censored for the truth that we are bringing. If you don't like what we are saying, that means that you're comfortable in the lie. But you have just an opinion and you are really close-minded because you have a bad experience with somebody you think was an immigrant, which you told me no American judge ever confirmed that they were actually the murderer. They were just deported. They were not even convicted. That's also really un-American. That's what the Nazis did. People wouldn't get a process. They would just get murdered or killed or disappeared. That's really not American at all.
And it's not American to be dual citizenship either.
Why do you keep talking about that?
Well, let's stop there for a minute.
Why do you refer to dual citizenship? Why is that such a big problem to you?
Do you want to know why? Because we have a lot of dual citizenship people in our local government, a state government, a federal government, as senators, as congressmen. Now, when you are a dual citizen, you have to pick one. And I asked the Canadian. Listen, I asked the Canadian man the other day in a space. I said, "Oh, I see that you're a dual citizenship." I said, "You in Canada?" He goes, "No, I'm in Idaho." Oh, that's good. And I go, "Well, why are you dual citizenship?" He goes, "Well, because I, want to be, and I want to travel back and forth, and blah, 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 blah." He goes, "And I want to be able to vote up in Canada, and I want to be able to vote here." I said, "Okay, so God forbid, hypothetically, say we go to war with Canada. Which side are you going to fight for?" You know what he said to me? "It depends on the situation." That's all I needed to know from an answer like that.
That's very interesting. That's interesting.
There's about 80% of United States members of the administration that have dual citizenship with Israel. Is that concerning to you, Susan?
I don't want them to have dual citizenship with Italy. Why? I'm an Italian descent. I'm an American. I don't fly an Italian flag. I don't even think of Italy.
Israel.
I don't care whether it's Israel or you're not listening to me. I don't care.
No, you don't know what you're talking about.
I don't, you're not listening to me. I don't care whether it's Israel or Palestine or Yemen.
You know who Jeffrey Epstein is? And you're talking about Canadians and United States people who are one family. Meanwhile, that country that has no business in North America is burning the place up with the hatred and the, inciting violence and turning people against each other. How can they be?
There's 78 or 79 million of us that think like I do. So
citizenship, and they think that they are the chosen people and better than any other people, because that's what Israel stands for. They are the chosen people, and they are 80%.
I didn't bring up Israel at all. You did.
Isn't that of a concern to you? They all have dual citizenship with Israel. That's no concern to you? Are you Jewish? Are you really yourself?
I should told you I was Italian, remember? Poor memory.
Well, Italian is a nationality. It's not a conviction like the Jewish faith.
I said oh, God. I never mentioned Israel. I don't care what dual citizenship you have.
You mentioned dual citizenship.
Right.
You are pointing cannons on little fleas while you're missing the big pink elephant in the room. How come? Maybe because you're blind.
I never mentioned Israel. It could be Italy. It could be Yemen. It could be Palestine. It could be
Americans in this
I don't care.
because you fail to recognize who is really emasculating your country. Do you think the United States is a country? If that's what you're arguing. There is a secret shadow force that is emasculating your country and everything the Constitution was stood for. And that is not because of Canadians also having U.S. citizenship. That is a complete distraction discussion.
I said I don't care what country it is. I just told you.
Oh, you don't care, huh? You don't care.
I don't care what country you have dual citizenship. Pick a country and be loyal to that country.
When are you going to get all these dual Israeli citizenship people out of the American administration? What are you doing about that?
That's not my job to do that.
Oh yeah, well, is it?
It's the State Department and the President of the United States.
To hate on long time, doubly legitimized residents of Turtle Island? Is that your job? Oh my gosh, man! Like you are really missing the target. As I said, I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry that everybody you care for had to go through this. This is unfathomable, and it cannot be justified, and it has no business in a civil society. It is not acceptable, and I don't accept that. I'm not advocating for having criminals having free range. I'm advocating for the Constitution of the United States not being trampled on. That's what I'm standing for here. Because
and the Constitution isn't being trampled on.
Yeah, see, that's where we're different in.
Well, you may think it's being trampled on. It's not. Read the Constitution. It says only citizens of the United States can vote. Right now, we have like 30 million illegal aliens voting in our elections. That's got to stop.
Susan, can I ask a question really quick here? I want to just ask a few questions. One, where we're at, we're in a heated discussion here, which is great to bring these points up because all of these points across the table we need to discuss it and dissect it. So let's come back to a starting point. We're throwing numbers around and we don't actually know what the numbers are, which is USCIS. They have a responsibility and they have an obligation to produce numbers, and there's also checks and balances in this country. So that is, instead of getting angry, are we both or all in agreement that that would be a fair place to start in finding out what is the total number and how many are in here legally, illegally? Are we going to do a checks and balance on the USCIS for very good reasons today? I think we've all addressed. So what's your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I don't know if you've read any Ann Coulter books. She wrote a book about probably 15 years ago. And back then, she was saying there was 50 million illegal aliens in this country. And you know what? I have a feeling that she was right. So she's talking probably now this 70 million, 80 million illegal aliens in this country. 25,000 illegal aliens were crossing that southern border every single day for 4 years. And those are the ones that we saw and could catch and release because we didn't have Remain in Mexico. We didn't have, we got rid of catch and release. He reinstalled catch and release. So I'm probably thinking more like 30 to 40 million came in 4 years. That's illegal. If you come in this country illegally, it's against our immigration laws. You are to be deported, period. That's the bottom line. You already broke one immigration law. Then if you commit a crime, you're really out of here. So talk about due process. Well, I know a lot of people that didn't get any due process and they rotted in a jail for 4 years.
I would have to agree that the first crime, there is a border for a reason. So that's why I'm advocating for that there be clear laws on the legal side of it. And there is not clear laws. Anybody right now, you go on USCIS. Okay, let's just, those of you listening at home right now, and let's see how long it takes you to fill out an immigration application, understand it. And better than that, phone them. you're going to sit on a phone line all day and not speak to anyone. You won't. And it doesn't matter. Even if you are a United States military family and there's a special line and you have national security threat level, your life is in danger, you have ties to the US military, nothing but crickets. So I know, Susan, the other day you said there was an exact number of how many were at the US southern border. And I don't want to, was it under 10? Like all of the illegal immigration on the southern border was down to what number was that? And are you ready now to move into the next part of the immigration problem, which is going to be inside the building and the setup and the system of the United States immigration, USCIS? Are you ready to go there?
38 last week came through the border, but they were all caught and sent back. 38 from 20,000 to 25,000 a day down to 38.
Okay, so it looks like we have a handle on the southern border. Are we ready to delve into what's happening on the northern border, which presents as a security threat, given what we've discussed today? There is a serious problem on the northern border. Are we ready to address that? I love our law enforcement, our military community to a fault, but I believe in checks and balance. I believe that security is a fine line, but your national security is top. So are we ready to delve into that? Do you think the president is ready to go there and address some of the things that we're discussing today, from press freedom, which is at stake? I am an international journalist from Canada, and my file needs to be reviewed immediately every day that it's not with an existing bounty for investigating child trafficking. Like, where am I supposed to go? What phone number do I call? So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think President Trump obviously talked to Carney about this. He didn't bother talking to Trudeau about it, but I think he did talk to Carney about it. And it's up to Canada to secure their own borders. If that does not happen, and the fentanyl and terrorists keep crossing our border, then we'll probably have to put our military up there. Yeah, that's probably what's going to happen.
Okay, that'll never happen because military, you know it, because of the Kumapastasis, you cannot use your military on your own soil.
We have our military down on the southern border, if you didn't know.
I'm going to just finish my phrase, please. God, you have no manners. As I said, Susan, it is questionable altogether how legitimate the United States corporation is even operating on native, never conquered, never ceded territory. Okay, that's the number one thing. You don't know the treaties. You don't know where the native territories are because your education made sure that you had no clue about these things going to school. Because then you'd have a totally different outlook and you'd know that the southern border cannot be closed because that is really not legitimate, because migration is what Turtle Island is. The native peoples have always migrated throughout Turtle Island. This is why we keep saying the description that you are bringing to this discussion illustrates one position. There is many other positions that have to be considered and have to be satisfied in the arrangements that we are finding to travel with each other and to live with each other in this realm. Because the laws and the great laws and the treaties that we all signed commend us to and bind us to accommodating that. So that, just as a fundamental takeaway, people have to understand. You can argue that crime needs justice, but then who is the criminal really? You can argue that we need more enforcement, and it's not going to be the military, and especially not at the St. Lawrence between Ontario and New York State or the New England states and Quebec. all of this area, even the Dakotas and Alberta, that is traditionally not policed because this is the original territory of native inhabitants who self-police and self-regulate. Now, as we earlier explained, if there is systemic fraud, and just one thing also on the formula, Canada is not in charge of American borders. Whoever wants to land travel into the United States from Canada is subjected to U.S. customs scrutiny. That is not a matter of Canadian scrutiny. If you land travel out of Canada, for your information, I know you both don't land travel. I did, because I'm a resident in those lands, those native lands. You would understand that you just roll out alongside the Canadian customs. You are not being held back by the Canadian customs because Canadian customs have no mandate to hold you back leaving the country. United States customs, as a fundamental comment, have authority to screen and scrutinize before you travel into the United States. That is not a matter of Canada policing anything or securing anything. The problem is that Canadian administration issues native, that for U.S. citizens, the equivalent in the United States would be the Native American status card, like Navajo people have, like Apache people have. You would get handed such a card because your nationality is Indian. And so henceforth, the Canadian corporation state would regard you as Indian, and interestingly enough, the United States Customs must let you travel in, or otherwise they are guilty of a corporate crime against the original residents of the lands for which these Indian people from India now pose. I don't know if this is clear enough. We tried to explain it a number of times. This is the fraud that the United States Customs is facing, trying to scrutinize people land traveling in with native status cards, Indian status cards that they have received in the Ministry for Indian Affairs, a Canadian federal institution. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Well, but that's the fraud that is going on. Now, the scrutiny for that, indeed, yes. I agree with everybody. The Canadian syndicate, the mafia corporation that is known as Canada in the north of Turtle Island, should absolutely stop issuing these fraudulently and illegitimately issued cards to people of from India descent. Okay? You could argue why we are letting these people in the country in the millions anyways. That is very unhealthy to ghettoize any society. Everybody knows that. Doesn't even matter what nationality or culture you're looking at. But the fraud is in the Canadian administration that has nothing to do with the border. At the border, something else that's going on. Okay, number one takeaway, I'm going to reiterate just one more time, okay? Because radio is a redundant medium, it's very fleeting. But be made aware, everybody listening, it is the authority and charge of the United States Customs officers to scrutinize land traveling people into the United States from the lands that are otherwise known as Canada. And people with native status cards are traveling freely back and forth. That is a vulnerability that is being exploited. Guess who's going to suffer the consequences of that? Guess who's going to get the repercussions of that? One more time, it's going to be the native peoples. Because people from India abuse of this loophole. And at least, I would think, it is a conservative estimate, looking at the United States Customs and Border Patrol, that at least 30% of those forces are implicated in this fraud. I mean, if they smuggle drugs, fentanyl, in the value of millions, guess what the cut is for these customs officers? They make a meager $3,000 maybe every month. They don't make much. Guess what the money is they can take home if they cash in onto these smuggling? activities. And that is nothing new. That's always been happening. That's why we have the self-perpetuating interest to fortify that border, because then we can cash in more. That is a fact of life. That's why we have, you see, that's why we didn't have a nation states in the medieval ages. We had lots of little splinter kingdoms, and every time you wanted to move on and travel into the next one, they stripped you of some more of your silver. You'd have to pay it off to get. This is the exact same thing that we're doing today. And everybody has a way of cashing in. And then people who have real business mandate and importance to be looking at all of these things free of restrictions, they are getting scorned. They are suffering the repercussions and consequences of this ungodly and very un-American procedure development tendency. It is not American. It's very fascist. And we need to go to UCIS and look at the people who are policing the borders. Who is policing them? If they are not scrutinized by the United States Constitution, I mean, that's the big time invitation to make it a cartel. Just exploit it the way you can, because you can, because nobody is scrutinizing you. I mean, it's naive to think otherwise. I've seen it in action. And this loophole that is being exploited because the Ministry of Indian Affairs or the Indian Embassy, I think you informed me, Val, is acting in this way, which is strange, because how could an embassy of a different country essentially issue work permits or residencies or any kind of status change for a foreign country? That's something that I don't understand. But in my information, it was the Ministry of Indian Affairs who did that. But whichever way it happens, that's got to stop. I mean, that is just. But this is how you do it. You have no interest to stop it. And then look at all these people being second-class citizens. You can do whatever you want with them if they have no legal status. You have to pay them. You can just fire them.
Well, it's clear.
They're just like slaves. They're just like slaves.
It's clear that an audit needs to happen. I've referred to this as we have a situation where there's crimes going on. And I say that because of the whistleblowers. And I say that because I do stand with our law enforcement and our military. And I'm actually looking at it, calling on them, saying we need to shift the focus and common sense, because there is many within who have stood and not cowered to this, and not just take cash outs and bribes. And there are people, as this goes on and as this continues, because this is obviously, we've been on for an hour and a half. People have started to look into this stuff. It's not hard to find this. This is all open source. You can look for it, find it very easily. You can see where the errors are. You can see where the cracks are. And it's what Susan said at the same time. It's picking a team. And it starts with, first and foremost, personal accountability, integrity, and time's up. Like, that's really what this is. This is a timing thing, and it's happening right now. So there's so many layers to this. This is just chapter 1, broadcast 1 of a very, very important issue when it comes to the security of North America. And when I say law enforcement and military at the border, I'm talking specifically, Marin. I'm saying human rights violations happening across Canada, but specifically within the North American border on one side of Turtle Island, okay, is so extreme. It is like the United States living on one side of the street and watching their neighbor across the street and seeing human right violations that echo China, or would make China blush in some cases, that we have to do something. And the whistleblowers are just going to keep continuing from both sides. Wherever there's problems or pockets of grease and a dumpster fire, don't we want to fix it? Isn't that what we want to do? Do we really want to just, say, well, I don't want to deal with that problem and plug our ears? I think we want to clean the cesspool up, and it's less. Don't get drawn into a flag of it's this party, it's that party, blame this. Let's just look at cleaning up the entire house, which is North America as one. Canada and US are allies. We are friends. Look, we just had Republican and Democrat senators from the United States go to Canada with friendship bracelets. What does that tell you? What does that say? What kind of message does that send? And they're aware of what's going on. You'd have to be living under a rock to not know that what we have going on in Canada is beyond barbaric. We have a government that's advocating to leave parents out and convince children they are mature minors and they can pick death. So your government is doing deals with children, these government representatives in Canada doing deals with children that leaves the children dead. Okay? What is that? What is that? So when I say law enforcement and military shifting at the human right violations, not just trafficking of drugs, but this is our next generation. If we don't get that right, and we're just gonna not touch it because we get a free card, nobody can respond to that situation, I don't think so. That's why I stand with our whistleblowers, our law enforcement, our military across both borders and inside both governments who are saying, today I'm making a stand. I'm going to stand and save lives, not take lives. So there is a change and a shift. And the politicians at the top, Donald Trump is one of them. I am not interested in giving anyone a free pass. He needs to know about this. Marco Rubio, same thing. It's important we clean up our own house first. And that is Canada and USA. We live across from each other. And right now, the United States is watching their neighbor act like an absolute abusive, out of control maniac. And now they're watching children being slaughtered by the adults of the house. So something better happened pretty fast. And I think it's going to, because there are families, their children are being taken away, being trafficked, because they're crying out saying, help, USA, help us. So this is going to stop. And we're going to stop it by looking at the problems inside of the legal immigration system, because we are one family in North America. So that's what I have to say on that.
I agree, Val. I agree. The problem is, can you imagine if Donald Trump interjected some type of power or suggestions? The left in your country would go elbows up, elbows up. They are so uninformed and have absolutely no idea what's going on within your own country. It's worse. It's much worse. It's nice that you say that, but we don't have a left. Everything is manufactured here. It's just the crown. The fight. Well, you're not going to vote yourselves out of it. That's for sure. You're not going to be able to vote yourselves out of this mess. The election was rigged. I don't know if you noticed that, but the election is completely fraudulent. We didn't have an election. We have an installation here. Our prime minister was installed. He is a banker who will ruin what is left of this place. That is already agreed. That's already what it's going to be. So it's nice that you think we have some kind of political opposition or even a political executive, but we only have stooges here. We have zero representation in Canada. Nothing. Everything is the English. Your fight is with the English crown. And
the Canadians who have any interest in sovereignty, they know that their fight is with the English crown as well. That's where the fight is. That's who the enemy is. And if you ask people who understand something about the history of Israel, they'll tell you that Israel is they're just acting like an outpost of the English crown. And that's why they're undermining the United States to basically undo the independence that you so bravely and heroically gained from the British troops when you had the Independence War, when many lands here turned English, even so they were fought over. Some people argue it was a manufactured war outcome, and thus Quebec still is actually part of the Union officially. There is so many different constitutionally different viewpoints on what the actual situation is. And some of our today procedures illustrate one position, and some of our today procedures illustrate and are a product seemingly of other position. So that's what I mean when I say people are really uninformed about what Canada is. But it is a colony, and you are again fighting with the English. You're fighting with the British. There is not even Canadians. There's no such thing. People who are interested in sovereignty in Canada, they will confirm that to you. They see themselves as more Americans than anything else. I've researched the freedom movements a lot. I've spent a lot of time embedded in the convoy, and then this whole year, 2020, I've been traveling around north of the St. Lawrence, and I have interviewed a lot of people who were in the camps and in the resistance. It's very interesting to notice that they would love to join the United States, and they've had it, and they feel betrayed and even trespassed on and treasoned on by the Crown Corporation, which is really the English Crown. So that's just something that I cannot urge people to research. I cannot urge enough for people to research it by themselves. But everything we have, all our representatives, they swear their loyalty on the English crown, not to the peoples who live here and who elected them or didn't elect them. I know we didn't elect anybody last election. That is, we have live video from people taking the ballots home over the weekend with the given votes. Okay, with the not fresh ballots, but like elected, like made votes, given votes, elected votes. Okay, they take the ballots home to their private houses. That is against the Canadian election. Elections Canada cannot even respect their own regulations. And who's going to oversee it? Some people say the Liberal Party, actually, Elections Canada is really, I should say it the other way around. Elections Canada is really the longer arm of the Liberal Party. I know a lot of people who say that. And the Liberal Party or the Conservative Party, they are all just in some way a controlled opposition. We all think they represent us, but they only represent the crown. I'm sorry, it's very depressing, but that may explain why some people in the north of North America are so passionate about joining the United States, and they are very disappointed, and their feelings are hurt, for their service and their commitment throughout the very turbulent last 5 years, that they are being thrown in the same pot with everybody else, which really has no American culture. Like
so would you say you're a 50-50 country?
No.
What do you mean with that?
I mean, you've got elbows up people, and then you've got conservatives. But as far as I can see, in the last 3 months that I've been listening to all the spaces of Canada, that even the conservatives can't get together and agree on anything.
Can I jump in on that? Because this is very, very important. You need to understand the cost of standing and saying, yes, I want to join the United States. You have to understand the political climate.
That you are around here. It's terrible.
You are being targeted. Yes, you're being targeted. Children are being taken away. They're being profiled. Okay, so the whistleblowers coming forward and how this is going down in Canada, because there is no checks and balance. You have the highest level of law enforcement in Canada is called CSIS. Okay, so it's the equivalent to the CIA or FBI here in the United States. There were brave men and women who stood up and said the spectrum in Canada, the entire one-party system, so it doesn't matter if it's the right or the left, is sold out to foreign interests. They put that on record. They put that on record. So it's so important. It's so important to know that our law enforcement are literally being held like hostages to this political, corrupt system. It must be put on record. When you have a conservative in name only politician, Pierre Poilievre, who has fed at the government trough his entire adult life, and he's worth millions of dollars, okay? And he is on stage dressed up in Chinese garb. This Alberta boy dressed up in Chinese costume, and he's singing children's nursery rhymes to an entire adult room of Chinese CP. Are they friends of the Chinese Communist Party? They have to be. That's it legally. There, if you have Chinese in any other country, they are loyal to their own government. That's the truth. And here's Pierre Poilievre with them, and they do this show. It's like a ritual where all the politicians that are in on this, they dress them up in their costumes and parade them around. And so for those brave men, and more are rising across Canada in our law enforcement and our military community and in the back offices of government, they don't know what to do. And so to them, I say, hang on, hold on. You you are there for a reason, for such a time as now. But don't you give up. Don't you think that you're alone. Don't think that your neighbor across the street doesn't know what's going on in your house, because we do. We hear the screaming, we hear the cries, we know the children that are missing, we know the men that are missing in Canada, the white farmers. Okay, we want to let's do an inventory. Let's start with who owns what. Trump.
That is such a good point. Never mind the South Africa stuff. That is so fabricated. Why don't we look at Canada? You're so right, Val. I mean, Val really has researched all these things. Like, I don't know, like 3 years in, you've been doing these videos on YouTube. You know exactly what is going on. And we just can't break this open. We just can't get this on. We keep tagging people like Tucker Carlson and Stu Peters. And I mean, Stu Peters is now already in a place where he's going to be dismissed by a lot of people. But people who have the rig, Laura Luma, people like that, the independent media alliance, digital media alliance, people are so overwhelmed with their own research, with their own productions, that it's very difficult to add any resources to help stories along that traditionally will not get a lot of attention, because there's so much interest against these stories breaking, because so many people are comfortable with these things not being known. It serves the division to make Canadians not understand what America really is about, what the United States really is about. And never mind if you like the leaders or not, you still have the rights that Canadians don't have. That's what I'm trying to point out to Canadians. It's not all that bad to be a U.S. citizen, but today, even people who are thoughtful and considerate are being noised out by this fabricated elbows up. I don't know if you ever had any personal experiences where you thought, okay, this doesn't feel like a natural feed. It feels like my feed is manipulated and flooded with certain topics that would naturally not be here. And that is very true for what is happening in social media in Canada right now. I know that there is absolute interference and manipulation in favor of the Crown Corporation and the association and legitimacy or responsibility or loyalty with the English Crown that is reflected in these social media posts, or the fact that posts about elbows up, and all of a sudden, in my point of view, 5 years late, the discovery of your own national identity, when we were all standing at the gates in the frozen rain and wind trying to stand up for our national identity, and did that all alone with the truckers and the convoy that came from all over Canada. These people haven't been standing at the gates with us when we were there 5 years ago, and then in 2022, they're like 5 years late to the party. And that is manufacture. That is now all of a sudden what the government thinks is going to be favorable, because once we amalgamate all of these representatives that I'm going to call and repeatedly have called the Erich Honeckers of this country, of this land, of North America, because they are the leaders of a foregone system that is obsolete, that has no legitimacy, and more people understand how it is not legitimate. And at least people should have their own constitution and vote on their own constitution. A people referendum. Not any representative should decide that. People should decide.
Okay, hold on, Maren. I'm gonna interject there really quick, because this is important to understand how this is being displayed out to the public. Our Clarity Act, our referendum that politicians are slowly starting to come around to, is designed by fail and confusion to never, ever work. And so this must be said, that this is how manipulative and psychopath these people that are absolutely like pigs at a trough, fighting for their job.
Let me create an analogy. It is really like the wall came down, and now you're trying to solve your problems with the Eastern German law and the Eastern German representatives. It's over. It's like we can never expect anything positive, progressive, or advantageous coming out of a system that is designed to keep people in slavery. And I'm talking about modern day Canadians who are serfs to the English crown in this framework. It's painful, and I apologize, but I've amply studied it. I've been here for 25 years. I know what it is all about, how it works, and what the effect of it is. And it all is being held together with this constant propaganda. It's propaganda. We don't have news channels. We only have propaganda channels. And we don't even need any truth. No propaganda channel is even held to being truthful anymore. There is loopholes today that even the United States, I think, have instituted with the Reagan and the Bush administrations. That same development was in Canada, that you can basically say what you want. If you come up with correction 2 days later in the back of the show where nobody's listening anymore, then you're okay, and you can distribute the big lie on the prime time 2 days earlier. So that is really a gross deterrent of truth or actual factual reporting. And so we don't have any shortcomings of propaganda, and this is what people run by. This is what they're used to.
Well, hang on. Hang on.
Like the authoritarian patriot, what is it? Paternalistic presenters like, what's his name? What's his last name? Manning? Preston Manning? Was it Preston Manning, or this guy that died, like gentleman died a few years ago? It was just like the patriarchal structure handed down again in the visuals and in the audio of it. So people get their schooling and their They're scaling in their propaganda, and it's so convoluted, and it is so not factual, and it's so not truthful, and it is one of the reasons why we keep complaining that in Canada, without the actual backing of the United States, we cannot accurately do any journalism. We are being blockaded and sabotaged and hung out to dry and starve. Really, that is what is happening to us here.
Well,
So what I
yeah.
was asking was, is it 50%?
Direction, Susan. Susan, I want to just thank you to spend so much time in these spaces. That is the right thing to do, because in the multitude of sources, there lies the truth. The more you listen to stuff, the more you understand what is actually going on. And I just wanted to congratulate you for doing that. I think that is great, and thank you so much for even going through the effort. I really feel I feel great that you are doing that, and thank you for sharing that with us earlier.
So the CRTC, which is the Canadian Radio and Television Control Center, regulates the airwaves, and it is impossible for an everyday normal citizen, like take me as an example. Here in the US, I could work towards having a radio station, like a broadcast signal. It's something that's doable. There's a pathway. In Canada, they regulate the license in such a way, you it's like it's impossible, and there's hardly any radio stations, okay, or TV for that matter. So it's very interesting how that plays a part in this. And when people are trying to say, well, why is it that there's, only these elbows up, and why aren't people rising up? As they rise, start counting the dead bodies on the other side of it, because we have a culture and a government that is openly passing laws that they will help you die. Think about that. And we don't even have a countable, structured way of keeping track of the dead bodies. And so I leave it on that we are.
Has all the dirt about that. I encourage everybody to go seek out Val's YouTube channel. I think just like my YouTube channel, we're going to link that here in the comments. Could you just plug it for once so everybody knows?
I have had major censorship issues. So my work, you will have to go under Greg Meakin, GregMeakin, Greg Meakin. I am so thankful that there are American patriots who really have found a way to keep my microphone on somehow, some way. And I thank from the bottom of my heart. I recognize the sacrifices of all of our vets. But our VVA.org, I owe so much to that community. And anyone listening today, please go on, donate, become a member if you're not one, and look at what they're doing. Look at how they're standing still today. Their mission never ended. They are active today, and I would not be on these airwaves if it wasn't for our dear soldiers. So I owe so much and say thank you. I don't know when I won't have a microphone, or I won't be able to come home. I don't know what my future holds, because the threat level is real, and I'm happy to share, because I will not go down on my knees. You're going to have to take this microphone out of my cold, dead hands. I'm going to use it right to the bitter end. And that goes for those of you at home who are listening. And I want to recognize how many are inside the government who know they're being sold out, and they know where the bodies are, and they know they're overlooked, they're not recognized, and now they're being expected to fall for dirty corruption. This is your chance to stand up, just like you did during Freedom Convoy, I watched a video of government workers on their knees, and law enforcement, police, ambulance drivers, government workers were on their knees pleading to stop the mandates. So don't forget who your friends are. They're all around you. And the complete mafia style corruption and terrorism that's going on home turf, it stops. It stops because as we talk about it and bring light to it and bring truth to it, people are not going to turn a blind eye. And all of you whistleblowers, there is a safe place to write your letters. And trust me, everywhere I go in the United States, and they know that I'm Canadian, the people at home care. They want to know what's going on in Canada. They are so engaged. So your friends on this side, look at it as we know the dysfunction that's going on in your house, the sickness, the killing, all of it. We know. And you've got China on the other side of you. On your
That's the thing, you know.
so
You have a republic. We have nothing here. We only have crime. We only have syndicate here. That's all.
so you're asking, what can you do at home? What should you do? The United States is the safest place in the world, is built on checks and balance. And you are going to experience that freedom. I am the only journalist on record with 3 years talking about Canada 51, talking about what's going on in Alberta. So you can catch up if you really want to take a look. There's people that are dead now on record saying they know they're going to die. They know they're going to lose their life in it. Those Canadian voices matter. Those stories matter. And this government in the United States is going to listen because they fought and they won. And they will not stand for communism. They will not stand for it. So maybe things feel slow and we're scared. Don't be scared. Be full of hope. Because people around the world are paying attention to the human rights violations going on in Canada. And Marco Rubio, when this gets to his desk, pay attention to how he responds to governments involved in human rights or in human right violations, especially when it comes to killing citizens, child trafficking. I've watched him. I've studied him. I'd be very scared if I was involved in any of that because it is going to come up, Canada. It's going to come out. So those of you with a conscience,
don't be under any illusions that Donald Trump knows exactly what's going on up there.
I pray he does. I hope he does. I will continue to use my microphone and my pencil and my pen. And I will continue day and night to phone every government agency, just like you can at home, Canada. You can do that. Be rest assured. The United States has the strongest, bravest, best military on the planet. So know that that's your neighbor across the street. When I first moved here, and they learned that as a Canadian, I can't have a gun in the United States to protect myself. Some dear vets who live down the street said to me, Val, all you need to do is yell really loud. So I'm going to send that back to you, Canada. When you're scared, you yell really loud. And I'm not afraid to give my phone number. You can call me day or night. You can join the whistleblowers right across that country at the highest levels of power. The highest levels of power who are not going to stand for this. My phone number is available to you. It's available to them. Don't underestimate who is coming forward. And maybe you are the next one. 480-501-3400. 04. And you can also write letters. You write your victim impact statements. Go to usetoto, USETOTO.com. Go there, pour your heart out, and you hit the send button. You keep sending it here. You send it to the United States. So hang tight and don't give up. We're not going anywhere. We're only getting started. This is just day one of, I think, 3. Is that right, Marin? We figured we had 3 broadcasts.
Yes. Let's say we're going to get it all done in 3 broadcasts.
Okay. So yes, this is dangerous. This is not for the faint of heart to report like this. So I hope those of you at home know I stand with you. And if anything is to happen to me, make sure and listen to this broadcast at least a few times and share it. And write and let somebody know if you don't hear me back on the airwaves. That means there's a problem.
Websites, I would encourage everybody, I would thank everybody to possibly go through the effort and link their research into the comments here. That would be really nice. So we'd have it all in one place.
Yes, and tag the FBI, tag the FBI, and tag the State Department, and tag Congress, and if anybody in power, they need to know. So just keep tagging them. Thank you.
Let's make the platform bigger than it is. That's all we're trying to do, and it's really very nice that some people help us with this, and we are very appreciative. It doesn't go unnoticed.
My question,
the next broadcast,
I just had to ask one more question. Remember I asked you about the 50-50 thing. Do you think it's 50% want to be 51st state and 50% doesn't? Or do you think it's more like 60-40?
That's a really good question, Susan. It's the $1 million question, really, because it's so difficult to understand what is actually real position and what is manufactured posturing. It's very difficult to discern what are we actually witnessing. But I think because of the matrix being very high, very thick still for many Canadians, it's probably more like, I would think 40% of Canadians want to stay Canadian, whatever that means. That would probably entail remaining a crown corporation. 20%,
Probably because they don't know any better, right?
Yes, most likely, because they are in a matrix, in a propagandized matrix where they don't have access all to the pertinent information. That is my assessment, and I feel for them. I'm not knocking them. Even for myself, I've been an analyst for a very long time. It's very difficult to understand what is real people expressing themselves and what is a manufactured media campaign. So when you understand that, I come out at the place where, and I was in that crowd. I was in the freedom movements. I know many people in the freedom movements. I don't think it's amounting to more than 20, maybe 30% who want to be independent and have their own constitution and not join the states. I think that's more 10%. I think by now that is probably extreme as a position. I think more people want to join the United States. So I think anything from 20 to 30 to 40% of Canadians would like to join the United States. That's what I'm thinking.
Yes, no offense. We don't need any more left-wing liberals down here. We have enough of our own.
You got that right.
I think that number, given the circumstances, given the amount of children, even our own government, they can't tell you how many children are missing or dead in their care. In 2023, I was saying this, we're paying politicians they have access to the data. They know an exact number. And not only do they not draw awareness to it, they don't know. We know the number is precedent setting. So these children have families and parents, and the government doesn't even care enough to identify the number, let alone the name. So when you're trying to understand from how many people, what's the percentage, you have to look at every single human rights violation and start putting those into a structure. And that's, you're going to say, well, like, let me ask you, the very person who's asking, well, what's the percentage? If your child was taken away from you because you stood up on what's considered American values and for the United States, would you answer publicly and take a survey when you know your government has the ability to not only take your children and um, permanently from you, but destroy you, completely destroy you?
Control and coercion. That is the modus operandi of this administration here in the North.
You need to write a letter to Donald Trump.
I have.
Yeah.
I have wrote a letter. I've addressed everything. That not only me talking about this is an attack just waiting to happen on my life, but I have addressed the issues with our vets. I have a real problem being a journalist in this country, and I can't get an official number on how many are dying a day and how fast your army is shrinking. And I can't get a response back. I have a problem with that. Like, why is it so hard? Why is there not a phone line or an answering service or an email system that addresses who read my email to him? I understand he's busy. I understand he can't respond to everything. But
maybe that's why he said to Connie, never say never.
I don't know, but I hope to reach him in person and just deal face to face. That's how I do business. I will go to every one of these Canadian politicians and bring my papers and my own checks and balances. And if I've made an error, I'm happy to go on the airwaves. They can show me exactly how many children are missing or dead. But my letter remains not responded to. My concerns were national security concern. I'm worried about our vets and our law enforcement and Chinese infiltration of products inside homes that are targeted at law enforcement and military. And I brought that to his attention. And I'm still waiting. I've let the FBI know, the CIA, I've let every department know, the Attorney General, and I'm not going to stop. I will keep going, and then I'll reroute and I'll go back again. And if I have to knock on doors and camp outside, that's what's going to happen. So I really hope and believe in him. I'm not attacking him, but I'm not going to give him a free pass either. These questions need to be answered on home turf here in the USA and from a foreign relations standpoint. There is nowhere for me to go and say there is a bounty on my head as a journalist in this country. If I die, does anybody care? Who? And what's the phone number? Because at least I can say, well, I tried. But I don't know where else to go. So you tell me.
We really need to get creative to reach the people that we need to reach. And especially Val has put countless efforts into, getting the word out. And when I understood the dimension of the crimes that she's been documenting, honestly, that is the stuff for nightmares. That is the stuff that does not let you sleep at night. That makes you wonder what is going to happen to the family of your friends next. I don't have any biological kids. Even so, I have babysat many kids of my friends. And I love kids, and they usually get along with me too. But it is so absolutely toenail curling and flabbergasting what the dimension and the scope of these mafia kind of like organized crime scenes are meshed in with the authorities that are then in a power of authority, and they just do what they want, and people have no recourse. Effectively, they have no recourse. And what is a recourse if somebody has taken your child? You haven't seen your child in 30 years. That just happened to my friend in Nova Scotia. Her daughter was being put under the power of attorney of a distant half sister, and poof, she was gone. And it turns out that half sister actually lives in the custody of a known rapist and child abuser. That's the other end of that cohesion. Okay, so the system is a moloch. It is like an octopus with arms. You chop one off, there is another one that it'll grow back, and we are being choked to death, and everything we ever try to do is, never mind dreams, like we are all just surviving at this point. We're not pursuing happiness. We're trying not to starve. We're trying to get our kids back. We're trying to not lose our kids to some organ trafficking, fentanyl pushing, no status gang that is abusing of loopholes in the administration. Because this is the thing, Susan, and I'm saying this to everybody from having little insights into the action here in Canada. It all furthers the dominance and the power of the crown. That is the greater outcome of these atrocities. People have no recourse. People feel weak. People feel depressed. People feel helpless. Okay, they cannot apply for asylum in the United States. They feel even more trapped because they have no options. Anybody from Rwanda, Sudan, and Ethiopia will be processed for asylum at a mere $84 per applicant. And you're right, Susan. They're going to get all kinds of amendments put in their pockets upon their arrival. That is true. Or maybe it's not. I really don't have any insights, but I hear it's true. So in any case, why is this not possible for Canadians who are in much dire situations in many applications? It's not only one case, it's a systemic problem. And it furthers the dominance of the crown, and it prolongs the life of a system that we should have abolished in favor of something more progressive that enshrines the rights of the people much, much earlier. Like I don't know how it can go on so much longer, but I have to recognize it's because of the deception and the propaganda. It's just
Follow the money, right? Follow the money.
The tapestry from the crown, what they say to you, the monks and the what are they called, the Knights Templars,
The Jesuits.
Don't invade. The Jesuits, thank you. Don't invade, infiltrate.
Mm-hmm.
Subversion is your biggest arm, is your biggest strategy. And that is why we are in dire straits. And I could only hope America takes it over. I would celebrate. I would dance. I would have blues songs playing. I would make coffee for the GIs. I would have a party as soon as I see a tank. Please, why don't you just come? Like, just take the place.
This is a rescue mission in your neighborhood. And to be in a place of begging and pleading, when what do you need to see? What is it you're waiting on? And at what point are people going to look at the names and the faces of the next generation? But Canada is like an orphaned child that has no identity, no idea who she is, or that there's value in her. She has been beaten down, and now there is a hunt. There is a human hunt.
Are covered with curtains.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but not anymore, because this is on record, and this will be dumbed down to a checks and balance to how many are dead. Like, you just have to look at all of the human rights violations that you have at your fingertips right now, because I know the number of what's laid down at your feet. And I believe that on both sides of the fence in the United States, when you see Democrats and Republicans, and just wait until these ambassadors get it together and get over to Canada, they are going to respond. And I don't care, day and night, I'm going to be in their faces. And because we have all hands on deck in the neighborhood, This affects the United States as much as it affects Canada. And I am going to work until I reach at least one of them to say, look at this. The human rights violations happening here matter like they do in other countries you have served in. Do not give these psychopaths a free pass.
Oh, we not. Our U.S. Marshals, for the last, well, how long has he been in office now? Since January? Has found 88,000 children.
88,000 children. Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And how many in Canada right now are not just taken from their families, are being actively trafficked? And how many men are dead, rural men, the target on their backs through land cloaking? Like, journalists aren't stupid in Canada either. I'm in contact. I am the mainstream media right across Western Canada. You don't think I have every one of their cell phone numbers? You don't think they're not smart enough to figure out you have a shell company, oh, it's not your name? Do you think we're all stupid? Like, that's stupid? You are stupid, and you are caught, and you are compromised. And all it's going to take is just maybe one person who has the stroke of a pen can do something. You are unelectable trash in Canada who are clinging, fighting for your everlasting job as the people around you starve to death and die. And when the United States, the military, the law enforcement, the FBI, the CIA, all of them start looking at these files, trust me, you've really got something to worry about. I'm not giving up. I am just getting started. So,
wind down. I just want to say this. I understand that the Trump administration, seeing that they're already that misrepresented, that they're being perceived as militaristic or imperialistic, um, like tyrants, really, by much of the Canadian population. I understand he shies away from a full blown style invasion style kind of overtaking, but if apparently Google already lists the territory that formerly belonged to Canada or was known under Canada. The name of Canada is listed now as United States territory. That's an interesting observation. But if he wanted to kind of finagle that in and just make it so, then he could still launch an information campaign about the consequences of one or the other way into some kind of sovereignty, and he could concede a referendum after this information campaign, not before a year's term. And then people could have info session every week that could be orchestrated by the State Department, and maybe there could be some external voices even contributing to that as well. For example, maybe we want to consult with some native input as well, and see what could be the solution for a territory like Canada that should really share the employment market and the economic market with the United States in favor of greater economic power. I mean, that is what is being attributed to Donald J. Trump. He's a businessman, and he sees this from a business point of view, and I think that is very pragmatic. I can only congratulate him to potentially leave all this nationalist rivalry in the dust. I would hope he would, because in fact, it's always been the pacifist approach of America to other nations to say, well, we don't have to fight you. We can just trade with you. Let's both benefit, and then we both will have an interest in peace. That's a core American feature of foreign policy after we, started wars with, before we started wars with everybody. But in any case, there's options to facilitate that. Right now, we have to recognize Canadians don't know where they stand. They do not see clearly the consequences of either option. And education is key. And why not? Why not put a budgeted effort to an American education campaign so Canadians can see clearly where they stand? Maybe some Americans should also get educated about that so we can refrain from this hateful rhetoric that doesn't offer us any solutions for the problems that we're trying to organize, So I understand he's hesitating to just invade it. I think that he'll never do that.
You said safe zone. I heard you say safe.
That's the problem. It would never be seen for what it really is. I would see it as a reestablishing of the border, a rescue before that independence war. That would be, for me, it would be not an overtaking. It would be a reestablishing of the borders that we had before the independence war, when it was all independent basically, and then all of a sudden, this problem with English occurred when really nobody was really, like, everybody was fighting about resources and skins and pelts and all that. I understand, but in any case, there is ways out of this misery forward. But not if we like want to hate each other all so much. We got to find a way of all living with each other. The abuse has got to stop, and our governments, especially in the north, have to return to a lawful operation, which is probably not going to happen without interference from the United States. That is also a very firm position.
Well,
I've seen it when the wall came down in Germany. You don't let the regime that you just overtook, that just crumbled, make the decisions for the next state. This is absurd. And after the Second World War, it was the same thing. The Allied troops made the decisions for the occupied Germany, the occupied and besieged Germany, so Germany could be regaining sovereignty at some point, and in some way. That can all be discussed. I have no problem with that. But you cannot expect Canadian authorities making any decisions about this. This is the deception that we're in. We need to negotiate with Canadian peoples, and we need to have an outside referendum that is not orchestrated by Canadian authorities. So that's all I'm saying, We need to somehow get the people with the people, and then have the people have the final say once we have the power removed from these crown stooges who will never allow us a favor in our own sovereignty or economic progression, for that matter.
Well, yes. And you said what I was seeing, in anyways, is a safe zone. That is the role of the embassy. I'm telling you that building is there for a reason. Use it. Open the doors. Maximize it. That is your dirt. So use it. Like, maybe there's people in the State Department that can work remotely, but if you are brave enough to come to Canada, you have no idea. It's not Candyland. It is an overtaken by a rogue government that lies to you. I have read their reports to you. They are liars. They are mocking you. If you come here with your checks and balances, you are going to see that. And if you come, I have government workers.
That is not the exclusivity of the Crown Corporation, but the problem is we only also have controlled opposition. Even the opposition, the real opposition wasn't in Ottawa in the January and February of 2022. That is the real opposition. They're in the streets. They don't have a seat in Parliament. They don't have that kind of privilege. And what we did is we vilified them. We made them the bad guys because our feelings were so butthurt that somebody couldn't agree with the stance that we've been taking. This is the perversion in people's heads that has been going on, Susan. That's what you got to understand. People till this day, I don't know how it is in the United States. Do you think that these people involved in January 6th have committed crimes? I don't. I know it was instigated.
Me neither.
It's very well documented. It was instigated. And the convoy was instigated too. And so all these very innocent and naive Canadians coming from all four corners of the country to be united together in that one cause, to be free from this government overreach. We vilified them. We made them the bad guys. And then we have a stooge like Pierre Poilievre who is controlled, installed, makes money. His wife had a PCR test company. I mean, it's just like, it's fascistic involvement everywhere you look. It's one thing you cannot, this mesh is so diversified and ingrained that it is really fascist everywhere you look. It's like you can't, it's not enough to chop one branch out. You got to take the root out of the thing. I'll tell you, get the root, you don't change nothing.
Donald Trump has a big heart. He always did. Every morning he gets up and reads several different newspapers and looks for stories of people in trouble. One of them was Nelson Mandela when they let him out of prison, but they wouldn't give him a flight to the United States. So Donald Trump found out about it and sent his plane to go and get Nelson Mandela and bring him here. Another story was his chauffeur. They got a flat tire in New York City. A couple behind them stopped and the guy changed the tire for Donald Trump. And the guy shook hands with the chauffeur. And then Donald Trump asked the chauffeur, ask for his name. Got his name. And he goes, "What can I do for you? Anything I can do? Anything for you?" Just send my wife a couple of dozen red roses. So 2 days later, a guy rang the doorbell, and there was a guy with 2 dozen red roses and an envelope. Inside the envelope was his mortgage paid off. There's another little boy out in California that was very ill.
I heard that story. Those are really beautiful stories.
And these are true stories. And every day he does that. Every day he looks in the newspaper, and no one ever knows about these. He keeps them quiet because he doesn't need the praise. He doesn't need the exposure. He just does it because he cares about people. So he cares about the Canadian people. He's not under any illusions of what's going on in Canada. Trust me.
Yeah,
he knows exactly what's going on.
He doesn't know. He does not know. No, you don't understand.
If he wasn't well informed about everything.
He doesn't know how many hungry children there are. He does not know that right now I can have 60 mothers on standby who will show you bare cupboards, and they are surviving on dollar store garbage with who knows what in it from China. There is no food. These children are hungry. There is no access. It's not safe to take your children to a hospital. Just ask the whistleblowers who have had their children die in front of them. Forced organ harvesting. Like it has to stop. If he wants to help, if there's some way to reach him, or ambassadors, if there's any expired medications, these are desperately needed. Vitamins, dewormer, the very basics. We need this in Canada. And you said if you go on Google, there's a safe zone, an American zone, then use it. Drop expired products. How much? You tell me how much it is and where we can get it dropped, and I will get a fundraiser. I will call every international government, and I will go through the human rights violations one by one by one. I tried with Mike Pompeo, nothing. And I will keep trying with Marco Rubio. I believe he will do something. And Donald Trump.
Listen to this. I'm sorry to cut you off. I know you need to talk more about that, but just to insert this real quick. I found out, I own some land in the province of Quebec, and I wanted to order some horse dewormer, speaking of dewormer. And in fact, in the province of Quebec, you now need to document that you actually own a horse. And then you need to have a prescription from your veterinarian to document to the pharmacy that you are okay to get this horse dewormer. That is like People have no clue how bureaucratic that is. The lady asked me outright on the phone, "Do you own a horse?" I'm like, "You don't think there's a little bit of a privacy invasion, or like right up front?" And she said, "You know what? You can just buy it in Ontario. Just like you could just go to the feed store in Ontario. You can buy it without any hassle." Like how can that be? And one in the same country, that is so. It makes this so difficult to facilitate because it's a little bit different everywhere. It's like you're not in one country. You're like artificially being divided anyway, whichever way. And it's the bureaucracy who rules. Did you know that in the same province, I need to, if I want to, rent out a community center, which I'm doing every Friday, because I play American music. Imagine that. Not flat on the one British rock music. Southern American stars, Southern US stars. So when I then want to have the option for my guests to bring their own booze and drink their own beverages, I need to have a license for that too. And that license costs me $33.50, and it only allows me to drink my own booze. I still cannot sell any booze, and I can still not charge people at the door. So it's like, let's do everything we can to make it really hard to have a nice party, have some people together, maybe talk politics a little bit offside. Maybe that's what is so feared in this whole thing, but how difficult it is to have a good time. One of the core things that Americans do, they live to have a good time. They don't have a good time to live. They're not there to like just make a living. They have a good time, you know? They pursue happiness. I find that so attractive. I like, and as I play an instrument, I can only decry how government overregulation absolutely kills any live music initiative. And then the people who are totally not talented at all, they get all the grants. It's like, I know all the good musicians, they sit at home and play in their basement for themselves because nobody's calling them. Because all the people who write the grant applications, I'm one of the conservative, very Republican sounding people in this context saying government grants are destroying the arts. And all of my liberal snowflake friends go like, that is so blah, 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 whatever they want to call me. Usually they call me a racist. I'm like, why? Like this is the effect of it. It's only because my bar is a little higher than yours. I know who Count Basie is. I know what real super quality American music is. Swing. Nobody doesn't even know how to play shuffle anymore because of this manufactured, British invasion music campaign that is documented with tons of big budget being.
Are you guys concerned? Are you guys concerned that Carney's going to shut off X for Canada?
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, it's all controlled. That's
he made a statement about 6 days ago that I was like, what? I'm like, talked about American,
That's just for posturing. Talk like that is like the sable rattling, for everybody to say, look at me, I'm so strong. No, you're not. But this stuff is going on in increment anyways. Okay, so people who are vocal and let's say explicit and well worded about matters that are rather complex and in a misrepresenting manner simplified in ordinary channels, that is just being misrepresented. That is just we just can't get this clear.
Okay, so, Val, go into the punch bowl and everything that you said to me today, tell it to them. They have power. They know politicians. They're connected. I can give you a few other names too. Trash Discord. You know him, right?
Trash.
He's very connected. He's very connected too to politicians, and they care. They're all conservative, and the punch bowl in the morning is the best place to be. Just request a mic. They'll give you a mic. Explain to them who you are and what exactly is going on up there about the children, especially the children, about the hospitals. They will respond. They'll ask you, what can they do? Because I'm in there every morning, and they'll ask you, what can we do to help? Who can we go to? Who do you want us to go to? Blah, blah, blah. And they'll help you. Trust me, they'll help you.
Well, can I ask, like, like I have to pay for this, right? I have to pay for the stuff. And so is there coupon codes somewhere where we can get like the very basics, or is there expired stuff that you know wasn't
You have to pay for what?
Well, the vitamins and getting the food, and we don't have, there's no, you don't understand, the grocery stores, there's like 4 pieces of beef. These people are not eating beef. Our meat is being sent over to China and repackaged and sent back here and sold for $70 for a little piece of beef to feed a family. I was posting all of this, but my stuff gets taken down and is censored. They don't have access to food.
Who takes it down?
Who the food?
Good question. No, who takes your post down?
Well, I don't know. Someone would have to follow my stuff. My entire page, I had 10,000 people in the community that I had built up, and my Facebook page gone, my Periscope gone, all of my community. I was very connected. Honestly, it's all gone.
Mark Zuckerberg is still the CEO of that company. He should be in prison. He should have been tried a long time ago. I don't know how many people's lives he ruined with that completely unconstitutional censorship. How long ago was your Facebook page taken down?
You know what? The day after my brother nearly died being shipped across Canada in coma because he didn't take, the COVID vaccine, and he was hospital to hospital the day after that happened in 2022. It's been down. I lost access. They demanded I give my passport, my driver's license, all of my ID.
Canada did that?
Yeah. Yes. Through Facebook. Through Facebook, they took it down. I lost my connection. I've had to rebuild my connection through people because my pages were taken down. But I'm saying I'm on my own right now because I can't get anywhere in trying, if I bring medication, I can only bring so much, and the needs are so high. You don't understand. The government regulates the food banks. They sit you down, they go through your bank statements, and they're like, okay, well, you shouldn't have spent money here. You shouldn't have spent money there. There's not enough food to go around, and they hoard it. It's all government controlled. You don't understand that there's nowhere to go. And now they control the seeds, like, that are all coming in from China to plant your gardens this summer. Like, you have no idea what's happening.
You're right. I don't have any idea.
Well, I don't mean it in a negative way. I just mean that everything is working against us. And all I'm asking is for the United States to open your curtains and quit listening to the shrieks and sounds of children being kidnapped, slaughtered, and wives beaten and husbands taken away. And guess what? The land, guess who owns it now? Not hard to find out in 2.5 seconds. It is so close. I think we need to have, I know, Marin, you are anti tech surveillance. I say bring it on. Slap cameras on me from one side of me to the other, and I'll go there and I will stand and show what's happening in this neighborhood. Because the United States needs to see it. It affects you guys as much as it affects us there. So you need to understand the operations of how they are doing this, and it's everything. The breakdown, the movement of Chinese tech that is inside of churches right now, inside of homes, so they can watch, they can see how you respond. The use of direct energy weapons, that is a biological weapon of warfare that is happening in Canada to the people inside of, like, do an audit, do an inspection inside of these buildings. To be a pastor in Canada that's on good terms with the government, you get a tax break. You don't get to talk against the government. That's why the politicians have taken the churches over. That's their news. They're at the pulpit. It's an infiltrated mess, and it's a matrix, and there is no way out. Today, there are families that are targeted, that will be picked off if the United States does not intervene. And I am laying those files at your feet. I am begging to say, take this. Look at this. Look at these names. Look at these people. They're related to people right here. Families ripped apart, and there's no way for them to even get out. That is not fair. That is not the American way. So, this could solve the problem. Just let them leave if they want to leave. Let them legally have an opportunity at least to try. Because if you take hope, like, what does that show the next generation of children? There are little children that wear Alberta USA hats to school. And I don't know if they've been taken from their families yet.
Oh my God.
It's so corrupt. It has to stop.
It's so tough.
Where
like I said,
this is happening across your street. Can you imagine? Can you imagine working for that government and knowing and seeing it? Can you imagine having to go and see it, and then you do the right thing? You know what they do to those? You know what they are doing to them? They kill their pets. They kill their pets. They come in through their Xboxes and harass their children. They force marriages apart. That's what's going on.
This, though? The Chinese, you think?
Is there a place for me to go? Where would you have me just? I will not give up my whistleblowers. That is my right as a journalist, to protect them. And until the United States stands up and says we're ready to listen, we're ready to see. What do you do? You put yourself in my shoes. What do you want me to do? Beam it out here right now? And for what? So that you guys can just look at it? And this is a human rights huge it's the same thing as what's happening in Africa. But what, do we have to have that many crosses up to your border? Please don't shut the curtains. And if you I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do, but I'm not.
It's going to get to the point that it's going to get so bad that even the people that the boomers, the elbows up people, are going to start saying, "Oh my God, this has been going on, and I didn't even know." And they're going to be begging to become the 51st state.
But we still need to get families out. Give them a chance. Can't you give us a shot? But to say, oh, it's $30,000. That's what I've had to pay. $30,000 I've spent on immigration fees, and I'm rejected. And they had the audacity to say, you can apply again. With what? You won't let me work. And I'm targeted for covering international child trafficking.
It's really painful.
And
it's really so absurd.
Where am I supposed to go? Where?
Do you know who Liz Crokin is?
I've tried to reach out to all these people. Yes, I know who all of them are, and they don't care who I am. I'm a nothing. I have one person listening to me right now. One person. So all these big shot names, I am sorry, that's great. They're wonderful people. I'm not them. I am at home, media mom, trying to route expired product from the US and get it to Canada to starving kids. And I don't know if I'm going to get shot in the back or my children taken away or God only knows what. But something has to shift here. It's too much. Like
100%.
Like the State Department is full of good people there. I know they are there. I know there are offices there. Why is there no phone number for if you like? Why do they not have one phone line that says if there's politicians in your country that are killing you, phone this line? This is a line where we have a human person that answers the phone. That's what the USA is. You have the strongest military for a reason. Use it. Like, be on guard. And I'm not saying anything bad, but to stand with your neighbor. When you're watching a neighbor beat and kill the weak in their household, you turn the lights on and you stand out there with your flag and anything else that you need. But we need that. We need that presence. We need it in the neighborhood. We are being terrorized. And once they take us out there, they're coming right here into your community. So please help us.
Just go say hello to my friend AJ at 613 Solar or solarwatts.io, I believe. Very interesting.
I'm sending him a link to talk.
Inventor. You have to go though.
Yeah, I do. My kids are here. Okay, you guys, go get. Yep, we're right on time. I'll wrap.
Well, let's say when we.
Let's let AJ go on.
Next week, and then we can let AJ in real quick.
Let him in right now. Okay, you guys get in the car. I'll be out.
But I want to get out when we're going to be on again. You want to do it again next week on Tuesday?
Thanks, Erica. Oh, thank you. What did you take from it? Talk. Say what. Say what do you want to say?
I heard that my mom was speaking about Canada 51. I have no clue what that is, but that's what I heard. And then how she's like a journalist, and then how expired foods and stuff.
So if you're hungry, what does it feel like when you're little, like today, and you are starving? What does it feel like?
Like you're sad and you're hungry and you don't have anything. And like, well,
you go to your mom and dad, yeah. You ask for food and they can't give you any.
Yeah.
And how do you think like that makes them feel?
Sad. Well, if they're busy or if they don't have any.
Yeah, and a lot of their families, mom or dad is left. Mom, they're losing. We're losing the battle to suicide as well. So there's not much mom or dads can do. But still, the littlest of the littlest are watching and living in the neighborhood. And I am appealing as a mother. We need the expired stuff you guys have. Get if you can do one thing, drop off food, do it. Take your drones, test them over the safe zone in the United States. Please watch Art Pulowski in Calgary. Watch what he's doing. He's feeding these people. It's rows and rows and blocks of people. We need
food. If the American administration was into embarrassing the Canadian stooges, I'm gonna come up with a campaign of the century. Do you have anybody who still remembers what the air bridge was? That was GIs flying the bread over to West Berlin, which was totally cut off
from a supplies for the rest of Germany because the communists had isolated West Berlin, right? So West Berlin was French, English, and U.S. occupied zones, okay? And it got so bad that the American GIs and the Tommies